Sister pushes pregnant me down the stairs as a prank. Parents threaten to disinherit me for pressing charges. I ended up in the hospital after my sister shoved me down the stairs during her party, claiming it was a harmless joke. My parents are now threatening to take away my inheritance if I file a complaint. I am 4 months pregnant at the moment, 28F. For the past 2 years, Newton, my spouse and I have been attempting to conceive. To be honest, there were times when we thought we might not make it. The wait seemed to go on forever. Then, somewhat unexpectedly, we learned what I was expecting. Given all of the challenges we've faced thus far, this pregnancy holds immense significance for us. The fact that we will soon be welcoming our first child into the world makes us incredibly happy. Newton and I decided to be extra careful this time because I've had miscarriages in the past. We made the decision to conceal the pregnancy until we were positive that everything was going according to plan in order to protect our emotional health. If for whatever reason, we also lost this pregnancy, we wanted to shield ourselves from the extra pain of having to grieve in public. My younger sister Elle, and my parents were unaware of my pregnancy until last week. At times, it seemed weird to keep them in the dark, but I also needed the time to think things through. From significant life events to minor triumphs, my family has always been the kind to celebrate everything. To be honest, I adore that quality about them. We've created a ton of wonderful memories together throughout the years, and it adds a special touch to every occasion. But when it comes to going to family gatherings, I've been a little aloof for the last 4 months. Given how emotionally taxing the pregnancy was, I simply needed more time for me. However, my younger sister Elle was ecstatic when she received a promotion at work last week. Last year, Elle's ideal wedding was meant to take place, but at the last minute, everything went wrong. Her ex cheated on her with one of his co-workers at his bachelor party the night before the wedding. The groom didn't even have the grace to show up and speak to Elle on the day of the wedding. Rather, one of his buddies arrived to break the heartbreaking news that he had made the decision to completely cancel his participation in the wedding. The entire scenario was really embarrassing, and our entire family was startled. It was meant to be one of the most joyful days of her life, and we had spent a lot of time getting ready for it. Elle was heartbroken. All of her hopes and excitement for her future with this man had been dashed in such a public and harsh manner. Elle immersed herself into her career after that. She used it as a coping mechanism to keep herself occupied and diverted from the pain. Although she has always been driven and ambitious, her commitment to her work increased significantly following the wedding disaster. Therefore, her recent promotion marked a significant turning point in her career and personal life. She virtually pleaded with me to come since she wanted to celebrate the occasion with a party. I could tell she truly missed having me around when she said she hadn't seen me in a long time. Additionally, I was being urged to attend by my parents, who kept urging me to do so and expressing how much it would mean to her. Given that I hadn't attended the last few family get-togethers, I really didn't want to let her down. I therefore at last consented. However, I didn't want to detract from Elle's accomplishment on her special night by being obviously pregnant and taking away the emphasis. The last thing I wanted was that. I didn't want to detract from her moment. I wanted her to experience it. But it was becoming more and more difficult to conceal as the baby bump grew. For one night though, I believed I could handle it. In order to hide my tummy, I wore a long flowing dress. I even went so far as to apply shapewear to reduce the bump as much as possible. I was determined to keep Elle and her promotion front and center. Everything appeared to be proceeding as planned when I arrived at Elle's party. I felt a little more at ease knowing that my attempts to conceal my pregnancy were successful because no one had any suspicions. When my mother saw that my arms and cheeks appeared somewhat plumper than normal, she did say anything. However, I had already considered how to respond to such circumstances, so I swiftly responded with a joke that I had simply been eating a lot lately. To be honest, I was relieved that they were less likely to detect the truth about my pregnancy and more likely to believe that I was simply putting on weight. For now, that seemed like the safer course of action. As the evening wore on, I became more and more aware of how uncomfortable I was. The celebration seemed to go on forever, and I'm not used to staying up late anymore. Newton, my husband, arrived at the party right from work and was enjoying himself. I was grateful that he continued to periodically check in with me to make sure I was doing okay. Elle and the rest of my family were having a great time in the meantime. They were having a great time dancing in the backyard and doing shots. Seeing Elle so joyful and carefree, especially after everything she's been through, made me glad. However, I began to feel nauseous, most likely due to the heat of the evening and all the greasy food. I slipped inside and found a peaceful seat on the couch after deciding I needed to escape the boisterous dancing and loud music. At that moment, my only true desire was to get home, raise my feet, possibly massage my legs, get into bed and read on my Kindle for a little while. I briefly closed my eyes in an attempt to relax and collect myself. My Aunt Mia sat down beside me at that moment, waking me up. I had fallen asleep without even realizing it. Without providing a reason, I shook my head when she offered me a glass of wine. She went on to say that I looked pregnant and that my face was nearly glowing the entire evening. I froze, unsure of how to respond. Aunt Mia is no fool, so I tried to shrug it off, avoiding eye contact and feeling uncomfortable. She asked me directly, "Are you really pregnant?" as her eyes widened in shock. Despite my inner panic, I made an effort to remain calm. In an attempt to divert her attention, I shook my head, but Aunt Mia put her hands on my stomach and her eyes brightened with total conviction. "Oh my God, darling, you are pregnant," she cried. She chuckled and drew me into an embrace. I was a little alarmed and practically begged her not to tell anyone just yet because I didn't think the time was perfect to make the announcement. However, Aunt Mia dismissed my worries. She reminded me that everyone had been eagerly anticipating this time, hoping that I would become pregnant, and demanded that the family should be informed of this wonderful news. Aunt Mia smiled at me, held my face in her hands, and reminded me that it was a family night even though I told her it was Elle's night. She told me not to overthink it and that because everyone had come together it was the ideal moment to share. Everyone was still dancing and partying when Aunt Mia got up and went outside before I could stop her. As I saw her, my heart fell. Aunt Mia captured everyone's interest with all the zeal in the world. Without wasting a beat, she pointed at me and told everyone that I was pregnant after telling them she had some important news to deliver. There was a moment of stillness while everyone processed Aunt Mia's words. Then everyone in the party burst out. My relatives hurried over to me, around me with congratulations, shouts and hugs. They were ecstatic, giving me a tight hug while crying and expressing their excitement for Newton and me. They were naturally thrilled to hear the news because they were all aware of my past miscarriages. My parents were so emotional that they were crying. In celebration of this new chapter in our lives, many congratulated Newton and gave him hugs as well. I definitely didn't want to reveal my pregnancy in this way. I had imagined a more private, intimate event, something modest and unique, something I could share with my family when I was ready. At a gathering that was supposed to be all about Elle, I had instead been dragged into the spotlight. I saw her standing off to the side at that point, smiling as best she could but obviously feeling uncomfortable. She avoided making eye contact with me and wasn't participating in the festivities. I was overcome with remorse because I had worked so hard to stay out of situations like these. I approached her and apologized for Aunt Mia's disclosure of my pregnancy. Elle inhaled deeply and inquired as to why I hadn't before disclosed my pregnancy. I clarified that I had intended to make the announcement a few weeks later, when I was more at ease and prepared to do so. She pursed her lips, shook her head and murmured, "Whatever. I suppose your request was granted." I was surprised by her response, and her comments hurt. I attempted to reason with her, but Elle didn't seem interested in having a conversation. She moved away after taking a sip of her wine and stopped focusing on me. Overwhelming advice from friends and family on being a first-time parent consumed the remainder of the evening. Everyone appeared excited to share their experiences and advice. Elle, meantime, continued to glare at me from the other side of the room as though I was somehow to blame for everything. I felt much more guilty and uneasy after her response. I had an overwhelming want to go to the bathroom at one point. I stood up and went to the guest bathroom, but it was completely packed. I went upstairs to use the restroom in the main bedroom because I felt like my bladder was going to explode. I went to the bathroom to relieve myself, and when I came out, Elle was waiting for me outside. She appeared inebriated. Sensing the awkwardness between us, I tried to apologize again with an awkward smile. Elle didn't appear to get any softer. Rather, she simply rolled her eyes and inquired, "Are you truly expecting?" There was a hint of suspicion in her voice, and her tone was almost contemptuous. "Of course I am," I said, looking at her while reflexively touching my tummy. Why would I tell a falsehood? Went on to add that everything was extremely strange, particularly since I hadn't even told our mother, with whom I often spoke daily, that I was pregnant. I was becoming annoyed by her incessant interrogation. I attempted to reiterate my justifications in the hopes that she would realize that I had made the decision to keep it a secret. I was shocked by Elle's insensitivity when she said, in a callous tone that pierced my heart, "Maybe this pregnancy will also end in miscarriage, just like your previous ones." How could she have said such a disgusting thing about my child? I screamed at her, my voice shaking with fury and hurt. "How dare you say such a thing? Even though I've apologized multiple times tonight, your remarks were inappropriate." My voice reverberated in exasperation. Elle retorted that she was upset that I had taken away her attention, particularly considering everything that had happened to her the previous year. I made an effort to remind her that I had supported her through her sadness, staying at her house for several nights and assisting her in getting over her groom's abandonment. I assured her that I would never purposefully overshadow her and that she should blame Aunt Mia for outing me without my permission if she was upset about the outcome. But Elle kept pointing the finger at me. I felt it would be better to leave and head back downstairs because I was so exhausted and tired of the debate. In the hopes that Elle would settle down and we could talk about it later, I needed some time and space to think things through. Elle, who was right behind me, kept calling me a selfish person and stating that I should have just given her a night alone. I chose to ignore her, but just as I was about to head downstairs, I felt a strong shove from behind. As I slipped and struggled to regain my footing, my eyes widened in shock. In an attempt to save myself from falling, I was able to grab the railing, but my knees gave way under the combined force of my own weight and speed. I ended myself sliding headfirst down the steps after losing my footing. My instincts took control in an instant. Desperate to protect my baby from the impact, I covered my stomach with my hands. My wrists felt the entire force of my fall as my body crashed down the stairs. It was a nasty fall. A quick, searing pain shot through my hands, and I heard an explosive shatter. The agony was sudden and intense. I lay collapsed on the stairs and screamed in pain. As I struggled with the unbearable pain in my wrists, my surroundings became hazy, but my top priorities were my son and if the fall had hurt him in any way. The rest of the family soon saw the chaos caused by my fall and my calls for assistance. With worried and alarmed expressions on their faces, they hurried over in a frenzy. Chaos broke out in the room as everyone sought to comprehend what had just transpired. Newton, my husband, grabbed me up right away and carried me downstairs. I continued saying that Elle had shoved me down the stairs since I was in so much pain. Everyone appeared astonished. Everyone's attention was drawn to Elle, who stood behind me, silent and with a guilty expression. She was confronted by my husband, who yelled at her for pushing a pregnant woman down the stairs. Clearly upset, my mother hurried up to Elle, shaking her shoulders and asking if she had indeed shoved me. Elle cried and nodded in agreement, her face hot and distraught. My mother was deeply affected by the realization. Elle then started crying excessively while embracing my mother and accusing her of being intoxicated and acting recklessly. I was in so much pain and shock that I was beginning to pass out. I could hear Newton frantically phoning 911 to summon an ambulance through the fog. I could just make out the worried faces around me as my vision became blurry. After then, everything was a haze of sirens, chaos, and frenzied activity. I ended up in a hospital room when I eventually came to. Newton appeared worn out as he slept in a chair next to my bed. My throat was dry and parched, so I gently woke him up and asked for some water. I asked him what had transpired following the fall as he assisted me in drinking the water. Newton described how the pain had caused me to lose consciousness and how I had needed emergency care for wrist fractures. I would have to wear the cast the doctors had put on me for the next 4 to 6 weeks while my bones healed. I then inquired about the baby. Newton told me that our child was safe after the physician's examination. I felt a wave of relief. Knowing that our baby will be all right made me happy. The anarchy that had developed following the disaster was then explained to me by Newton. Elle's family was so upset with her that they attempted to have her arrested. But the cops had only been able to get statements from the witnesses because I was unconscious. Before they could file any charges, they still needed my formal statement. Newton grasped my hands and emphasized the need for me to report my sister's behavior and put aside my feelings for her. He was adamant, saying that, considering my condition, there was no excuse for her to shove me down the steps. Still in shock, I shook my head. It was nearly impossible for me to comprehend how Elle could have done something so damaging. Although my wrists hurt physically, I could not handle the emotional toll of knowing that my own sister was capable of such harmful behavior. I wanted to talk to Elle first, I told Newton. I had to know what had made her do such horrible things. In order to get an explanation or at least an apology, I needed to speak with her directly. Newton gave me his phone and dialed her number. I asked my sister directly why she had done what she had done when she responded. Elle let out a long sigh, as though the words were hard to release, and then he opened up. In a bitter tone she uttered, "To be honest, I'm just so sick of you being the center of attention in our family. You have a husband now. You're pregnant. You get to have everything in your life. But last night was supposed to be my night, only. Yet, as usual, you showed up with your pregnancy announcement and hogged all the attention." After a little silence, she spoke again in a defensive tone. "And pushing you down the stairs, that was just a harmless prank. I didn't even think you were really pregnant at first. I didn't mean for it to be such a big deal." Her remarks were painful and disturbing. It was unbelievable to me that she would put my life in jeopardy by pushing me down the stairs because she didn't want to trust me. Before I could respond, Elle added, "I've been through a lot with my failed engagement, and for you to just show up and rub your happiness in my face was just too much. Next time, I'm sure you'll think twice before trying to overshadow me again." Her answer left me in a state of shock. She was essentially blaming me for her actions and showed no remorse at all. She hadn't even shown regret once. Elle handed the phone to my mother, who had been listening on the other end, and she inquired about my well-being. I was unaware that my sister and my parents were still present. I informed her that I had suffered a fracture to my wrist but that both I and my infant were doing well. After the party, my mom told me that she, Dad and Elle had spent the entire night at Elle's house because they were all concerned about me. I sneered and said that instead of staying with my sister, they might have waited for me at the hospital if they were that concerned. My mom went on to say that she and Dad had been speaking with Elle and that they both thought she hadn't been feeling well since last night. Despite what other people were telling me, she insisted that I not report my sister to the police because it was only a foolish drunken error. I was taken aback by my mother's request. In an attempt to understand the situation, I questioned, "Why are you defending Elle when she hasn't even apologized to me?" With a heavy sigh, my mother said that Elle was currently dealing with a lot of difficulties. She said that Elle had been crying uncontrollably and that I had made her feel ashamed in front of everyone. I reminded my mother that they should first address the fact that Elle had shoved me down the stairs, which was the true problem. My mother began stressing that family is family, and that disputes like these occasionally occurred amongst sisters. Although it was true that Elle had never done anything like this before, she pointed out that this did not justify her current actions. My mother said that it wasn't worth filing a lawsuit for a broken wrist and pledged to work with Dad to ensure that this doesn't happen again. My annoyance peaked. I adamantly said that I had been unsure of what to do before I phoned her. But I had already made up my mind after speaking with Elle. A lesson had to be given to her. My mother, who was becoming more and more agitated, pleaded with me to think again before bringing charges against Elle, warning that doing so may ruin his career. I informed her that right now, I couldn't give a damn about it. My mother made a last-ditch effort to persuade me to bring charges against Elle by threatening to disinherit me if I did. She contended that it would impact Elle for the rest of her life and create a lasting record. I was stunned by her threat, but I refused to back down. I proceeded to pursue a complaint against my sister after the phone call. She hadn't expressed regret for what she had done, but I was torn about perhaps ruining her life. Update 1. I wanted to let you know that my sister was eventually taken into custody. Despite the constant calls from my parents, my spouse and I have turned off our phones. Newton is furious that my parents appear to be giving preference to my sister over me. Newton's family and other family members have contacted him in the interim to show their concern and support. Everyone agrees that it was the correct thing to charge my sister. I'm much more concerned about my baby's safety now that I've read some of your remarks. I'm worried that Elle could endanger my unborn child in the future if she were able to shove me down the stairs. In order to prevent her from ever coming near me or my family again, I want to obtain a restraining order against her. Update 2. Hi there, other Redditors. My sister, who was previously accused of assault, was just sentenced since I provided an update last month. My parents paid for her attorney, who was quite good and made a compelling argument. She was placed on probation because it was her first infraction. The judge mandated that Elle pay for my medical expenses, participate in 6 months of required psychotherapy, and meet with a probation officer on a regular basis. After the criticism they've been getting from the rest of the family, my parents are still very angry with me but are too scared to address me. My parents urged me to protect Elle by not pursuing charges against her, and I have freely acknowledged this to everyone. My parents have received reprimands from relatives on both mine and my husband's sides. No one believes that Elle's mental health issues are a good enough reason for what she did to me, despite my parents' continued insistence on it. In order for Elle to recover, I sincerely hope that my parents will take her to visit a doctor. I've requested a restraining order after the sentencing to make sure she can't ever again come near my family or me. I honestly don't know how to respond to people who question if my sister was always kind to me when we were growing up or if perhaps I missed certain clues. Yes, we occasionally battled and had our typical arguments, but I never thought she would have such a strong grudge against me. I've always loved her dearly as her older sibling, and I never imagined that she could push me down the stairs out of retaliation. Believe me, I'm just as astonished as everyone else. I suppose it's accurate to say that those closest to us are frequently the ones that betray us. Update 3. I haven't posted anything here in 5 months. Neither Newton nor I have seen Elle or communicated with my parents. I gave birth to my baby 5 days ago. After being released from the hospital, Newton and I are now giving our newborn baby the finest care possible. I heard a tap on the door last night, right before we sat down to eat. I was surprised to see my mother standing on my porch when I opened it. I was totally surprised because I had not anticipated seeing her. I said, "What are you doing here?" With caution. My husband was just as perplexed as I was to find her there, so he moved up next to me and stood guard in front of me. My mother burst into tears at once, telling me that she had just had to come over to meet the baby after hearing from some of the relatives that I had given birth to. Considering everything that had lately transpired between us, her excitement didn't seem appropriate. She continued by expressing how happy she and her father were to be grandparents at last. In order for us to rejoice as a family, she said that Dad would be coming soon with some wine and baby presents. Newton and I exchanged a look of incredulity. Did my mother truly act as though nothing had happened in the past few months? As quietly as possible, I told her that we hadn't communicated in the previous 5 months because she had chosen to side with Elle rather than me. She was standing on my porch, however, pretending that we were all on good terms simply because I had given birth, as if we were going to have a happy family reunion. Newton informed my mother that the instant she decided not to be a decent parent to me first, she had given up her right to be a grandma. He reminded her that Elle had treated me cruelly and that he would have beaten her up immediately if she hadn't been my sister, but she had shielded that monster from me because she was a mother. I could tell his remarks struck a chord because they were forceful. My mother's expression changed to one of rage. She attempted to counter by claiming that those were matters of the past and that she had done what she had to do. She maintained that we couldn't simply remove her and her spouse from our child's lives. She emphasized how unjust it was that we prevented her from seeing her grandchild. Newton, however, would have none of it. He told her that we chose who could be engaged in his life because this was our boy. Having her in our lives made neither of us feel at ease. My mother persisted in claiming that the reason she did what she did to me was because Elle had been diagnosed with depression. I shook my head in exasperation as my mother continued to defend Elle's behavior, saying she felt bad about what she had done and was trying to change. She promised that after my son was born, we would all be able to move on from the past and be a single, happy family. I sneered and clarified that I didn't desire such a thing. My mother believed she could simply ignore everything and return to our life, but circumstances had changed. There was no return to the previous state of affairs. I asked my mom to go because I couldn't take any more of it. After everything that had been said thus far, I didn't want to ruin my mood any further. Just then, my father pulled into our driveway. He exited the vehicle with a basket of presents and a large teddy bear. I was too exhausted to argue with my parents any longer, and I couldn't understand their insolence in showing up without warning. Fortunately, Newton intervened and told me to return inside and rest. He promised to deal with them and resolve the issue. I reluctantly allowed him to. I could still hear their words coming through the door as I made my way back inside. Newton's refusal to let them both in almost immediately sparked the uproar. Because he was family, my dad insisted repeatedly that he had every right to see me and the baby. My normally composed hubby lost his temper. If they didn't leave our land right away, he threatened to contact the police. Naturally, my dad persisted in arguing and insisted on leaving the baby presents behind, as though it would somehow make up for everything. Newton, meanwhile, was adamantly against taking anything from them. He made it clear to them that we did not accept their presents and that we would also obtain a restraining order against them if they ever revealed their identities again. His response clearly shook my parents. After everything, especially with a baby now involved, I suppose they thought they could just waltz back into our lives. I was pleased with my husband's handling of the matter. After our conversation today, Newton and I have decided to put cameras throughout the house as a precaution. I wish to never again see my parents. I discovered my girlfriend was cheating with my brother. I exposed them at my wedding. But the drama is far from over. I, 45 am, never imagined that I would be writing this, yet I feel compelled to do so. My wedding day last week was supposed to be the best day of my life. Instead, because of my own acts and the betrayal of my family, it became a nightmare. I'm not sure if I made the correct decision, and I'm still processing everything that transpired. This is the complete tale. I believed that the woman I was seeing 6 years ago was the love of my life. After almost 2 years of dating, I was thinking about popping the question. I believed that she, 32F, was all I could have ever wanted. Intelligent, attractive, and we appeared to have similar values. I happened to find some text messages on her phone one day. I swear I wasn't spying. I had seen them when she was in the shower and asked me to check something for her. She and my younger brother, 40M, exchanged messages. I initially believed it to be harmless family banter, but as I continued reading, my heart fell. Let's just say it was obvious they were more than just buddies because they were discussing getting together and how much they missed one another. As soon as she emerged from the shower, I confronted her. She initially tried to gaslight me into believing I was paranoid by denying it. She started crying though, when I showed her the messages. She and my brother have been having an affair for months, right in front of me, it turns out. I was heartbroken. The two people I trusted the most in the world had betrayed me in the worst way possible. Not only had my girlfriend cheated on me, but she had done it with my own brother. I told her to leave my life and immediately stopped our relationship. My brother attempted to defend it when I challenged him about it. Can you believe that he claimed they couldn't help their feelings after falling in love? As though somehow that made it okay. I told him I didn't want to see him ever again and that he was dead. My parents should be on my side, wouldn't they? False. They continued to urge me to forgive my brother, even though they were disappointed in him. They would say, "He's your brother. Family is the most important thing." In my opinion, loyalty and trust are the most crucial factors, and both my parents and brother have demonstrated that they are unaware of this. I broke up contact with everyone. I knew I couldn't have individuals like that in my life, even though it was difficult. I spent the following couple years concentrating on myself. In order to deal with the trust issues this whole mess had caused me, I began therapy, put myself into my work, and gradually began to reconstruct my life. Then I met my now wife, 39F, approximately 2 years ago. She was patient, kind and compassionate, unlike anyone I had ever encountered. She was aware of my background and my family's problems, but she never pressured me to get back in touch with them. I felt like I could trust someone again with her. The happiest moment of my life was when I proposed to her. I was thrilled to begin this new chapter as we began organizing our wedding. Naturally, neither my brother nor my parents were invited. They were no longer a part of my life, in my opinion. I did, however, inform my parents about the wedding, not because I wanted them to attend, but rather because I knew they would ultimately learn and I didn't want any trouble. I made it apparent that neither my brother nor they were welcomed. Of course, they tried to argue. My father gave me a family lecture and my mother sobbed, but I refused to back down. On the wedding day, everything went according to plan. I felt like I was finally receiving the happy ending I deserved. My wife looked stunning, and our friends were all there to support us. That is, until right before the ceremony started, my best man rushed up to me. "Your parents are here," he stated with a distressed expression. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach when they said, "And they brought your brother and his wife. Dare they? How dare they bring my brother, of all people, and arrive without invitation?" I was enraged. They were supposedly unwilling to move, even after I told my best guy to tell them to leave. Barely able to control my rage, I called my father. I spat into the phone. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He said, "Son, it's your wedding day." As though that clarified everything. "We're your family. We should be here." With a trembling voice I stated, "I made it clear you weren't invited. Especially not him." 6 years have passed, my father countered. "Don't you think it's time to let bygones be bygones? Your brother is sorry for what he did. He's married now. His wife is pregnant. Can't we just be a family again?" What I was hearing was unbelievable. Did they honestly believe that all would be forgiven if they simply showed up? That I'd throw open my arms to them? I said, "Get out," in a strong, icy tone. "All of you, get out now, or I'll have security remove you." "Don't be dramatic," my dad said. "We're already here. Just let us stay for the ceremony, for your mother's sake if nothing else." I was on the verge of losing it all when my wife showed up. She could see how unhappy I was because she had overheard a portion of the talk. "What's going on?" she inquired, her expression displaying worry. I told her what was going on, thinking she would be as upset as I was. However, my wife, always the rational one, suggested a middle ground. She answered, "Let them stay for the ceremony. It's not worth causing a scene and ruining our day. We don't have to interact with them. After the ceremony, they can leave." I understood her argument, even though I didn't like it. I did not want a family fight to be the only memory of our wedding. I agreed against my better judgment. The ceremony proceeded according to schedule. I made an effort to concentrate on my wife, our vows, and our professed love for one another. However, I couldn't help but be hyper-aware of my family members seated in the back rows, my father sitting rigidly with a fake smile on his face, my mother wiping her eyes with a handkerchief, my brother appearing uneasy, and his wife clearly pregnant. I noticed my parents approaching us after the ceremony while everyone was chatting and praising us. I stiffened, braced for conflict. However, my best man stopped them before they could get to us and reminded them of the deal, which was that they would go following the ceremony. I observed their silent argument, my father appearing stern and my mother making frantic gestures. At last, my brother and his wife followed them as they turned and departed. With a sigh of relief, I believed that the worst was behind us. The speeches followed though. In his emotional toast, my best man expressed his happiness for us and our friendship. Other friends joined in, offering wishes and amusing anecdotes. I then made the decision to give my own spontaneous speech, driven by a combination of rage, champagne, and a desire for vengeance. I got to my feet and clinked my glass to get attention. With all eyes on me, the room went silent. We hadn't planned for me to give a speech, so I could see my wife giving me a questioning look and probably wondering what I was doing. To my brother, I murmured, maintaining my composure in spite of the rage that was building within me. There was a whisper in the audience. Those who were aware of my past relationship with my brother appeared perplexed, while those who were not likely found this to be a kind gesture. Adding, "My brother isn't here today. But I'd like to thank him all the same. You see, if it wasn't for him I might never have met my wife." I stopped, sipped my champagne and looked around the room. My brother and dad, who had been about to leave, had halted their journey. Their looks were a mix of fear and optimism as they stared at me. 6 years ago my brother did me a huge favor, I remarked, sarcasm leaking out of my voice. He showed me exactly the kind of person he is by having an affair with my girlfriend. Deathly silence fell in the room. I couldn't stop, even though I could see the discomfort and shock on people's faces. I was releasing years' worth of repressed hurt and rage. I went on. That betrayal taught me a lot. It taught me that the people you trust the most can hurt you the deepest. It taught me that family doesn't always mean loyalty or love. And most importantly, it set me on the path that led me to my wife. I noticed the worry in her eyes as I turned to face her. However, I was too far gone to turn back now. I said, "So thank you, brother," as I lifted my glass. Thank you for showing me what true betrayal looks like. Thank you for teaching me that blood isn't always thicker than water. And thank you for being such a monumental screw-up that it made me work on myself. Made me become a better person, a person worthy of someone as amazing as my wife. After emptying my glass, I placed it firmly on the table. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see my brother's wife staring at him in disgust and shock, my parents looking like they'd been slapped, and my brother, well, he couldn't even look up from the floor. "Oh, and Mom and Dad," I added, "thanks for showing up uninvited and bringing him along." It gave me the perfect opportunity to let everyone know exactly what kind of family I come from. I felt a weight lift as the door closed behind them, but it was quickly replaced by another one as I turned to face the stunned crowd of our wedding guests. My brother's wife practically dragged him out as they left, followed by my parents, my mother crying and my father red-faced with embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. The hush was broken by my wife first, who gestured to the waiters and remarked, "I think we could all use another drink." Suddenly, the enchantment was broken. And conversation resumed, though I could hear whispers of my name everywhere in the room. With a look of disappointment and worry on her face, my wife drew me aside and questioned, "Was that really necessary?" I replied, "I'm sorry," as the adrenaline left my body. I couldn't let them get away with showing up like that, trying to play happy families after everything they've done. Squeezing my hand, she sighed and added, "I know what you mean, but this was meant to be our day. About us, our future, not about your past." She was obviously correct. In my rage, I had made our wedding about my family's turmoil rather than our love. I experienced a small remorse, but it was outweighed by the relief of finally getting my point over. I tried to refocus the conversation to more upbeat subjects, but I could tell that my outburst had clouded the event. The remainder of the reception was a bit of a haze, with people approaching me repeatedly, some expressing support and others obviously uncomfortable. I didn't really realize the consequences of what I had done until later that evening, when my wife and I were by ourselves in our hotel room. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed and whispered, "I'm so sorry, I ruined our wedding day." "You didn't ruin it," my wife remarked quietly as she sat next to me and took my hand in hers. "It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that's what matters." I exclaimed, "How did I get so lucky to find you?" As I gazed at her, amazed by her forgiveness and understanding. She said, "I love you and I'm on your side, always," with a smile that quickly changed to a serious face. "But what you did today, it's going to have consequences. Are you ready for that?" she said. I gave a hesitant nod. "I believe so," I murmured. "We'll deal with whatever comes up together, right?" she said, "Always," and leaned in to give me a kiss. I couldn't help but wonder what those repercussions might be as we went to bed that night. I had publicly humiliated my family and exposed our private issues to the world, And while I felt justified because they had invited themselves, I was also concerned about the fallout. How would this impact my wife, who had been nothing but supportive, but I knew this wasn't what she'd agreed to when she decided to marry me. Would my brother's marriage survive this revelation? Would my parents ever talk to me again? I silently promised myself and my wife as I fell asleep that I would confront whatever came next, stop avoiding my history, stop allowing my family's behavior to dictate my life and start thinking about our future, mine and my wife's. I had no idea that the drama would continue for weeks to come, with surprises and confrontations I never expected, but that's a tale for another day. For the time being, I'm left wondering, did I make the right decision? Did I sink to their level, or was it okay to publicly shame my family? And most importantly, how do I proceed from here? Thank you for reading this far. I feel like I'm at a crossroads and I'm not sure which path to go, so I would appreciate any thoughts or ideas. First update. Life threw me another curveball a week after the wedding disaster, just when I thought things may settle down. I know this is out of the blue, but I need to talk to you in person, if possible. There are things I need to know, and I think you're the only one who can give me honest answers, said my brother's wife, 35F, in a trembling voice when she called me yesterday. Incredulous, I frantically tried to think of what she may want to discuss, and then it dawned on me: the wedding, my speech, and the disclosure of my brother's affair. As soon as I hung up, I went to locate my wife, who was working on some files in our home office, and she realized something was wrong after seeing my face. I told her I would consider it and get back to her. I told her what was going on, half expecting her to instruct me to keep my mouth shut, but my wife, as usual, took me by surprise. I think you should meet with her, she remarked after giving it some thought. You see, we can't change what's already done. However, your brother's wife is innocent in all of this. She is now enmeshed in a tangle that she did not cause. Don't you think you should give her some closure if you can? She was correct, and even though I wanted to forget about it, I couldn't deny that my actions at the wedding had probably completely upended this woman's life. And she was pregnant, for crying out loud, and that the stress of it all couldn't be good for her or the unborn child. My wife agreed to accompany me for support, so I called my brother's wife back and set up a meeting for the following day at a quiet cafe. My heart sank when I saw my brother's wife enter. She looked exhausted and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying. She must have been in her third trimester, and as she drew nearer, I could see that her pregnancy was even farther along than I had thought. This made me feel guilty once more. As she slid into the chair across from us, she said, "Thank you for meeting me. I need to know everything, from the beginning. I need to understand what happened between your brother and your ex-girlfriend. When it started, how long it went on. Everything." I inhaled deeply before telling her everything. How I had discovered the messages on my ex's phone. How I had confronted them both. How they had attempted to defend it by claiming to have fallen in love. How my parents had urged me to forgive them, and how I had severed all contacts with them. I kept a close eye on her expression while I spoke. She continued to be largely unresponsive, but I could see the anguish in her eyes and the faint quiver of her bottom lip. She was silent for a while after I was done, then she said, "Are you certain? Are you positive that it was him?" "Yes," I muttered. "I apologize, but I'm positive." Her hand instinctively moved to rest on her big belly as she nodded softly. "It was all a misunderstanding," he informed me. "Because you were attracted to his girlfriend and found it hard to believe she had chosen him. You severed relations with the family for that reason." Anger shot through me. He had lied to her, of course. Why had I anticipated a different outcome? I repeated, "I apologize," as I was at a loss for words. She gave a headshake. "Avoid becoming. You are not to blame. I'm at a loss on what to do. A baby is due in a few weeks. How can I possibly believe him? With someone who could do this, how can I raise a child?" My wife gently raised her voice. "I have no simple solutions. You're not alone though, and I want you to know that. We are here to help if you need it in any form." My brother's spouse gazed at her with an expression of surprise. "Why? You're not even familiar with me." The simple response from my wife was, "Because it's the right thing to do. And regardless of what has transpired between the adults, that baby is family." With a wave of pride and affection for my wife, I nodded in accord. Of course, she was correct. My brother's child, my niece or nephew, shouldn't be affected by any problems I had with him. With passion choking her voice, my brother's wife responded, "Thank you. As of right now, I have no idea what I will do. However, it means a lot to know that I have support." We continued our conversation, exchanging contact details and forming provisional plans to keep in touch. She was about to depart when she stopped and gave me a serious look. She remarked, "I can see why you did what you did at the wedding. I understand, but I'm not saying that was right. I am, in a sense, appreciative. At least I now understand the reality." We were both deep in thought on the way home. My wife finally raised her voice. "Are you all right?" she inquired. I let out a sigh. "I'm not sure, I feel bad for hurting her. However, I'm also relieved that the truth has come to light." "Is that really so bad of me?" My spouse gave a headshake. "It's a human. The entire scenario is complex and disorganized. There are no unambiguous right or wrong responses." Of course, she was correct. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that this was only the beginning. The truth was now known to my brother's wife. But how would she use that knowledge? Would she go up to my brother? Drop him? What about the infant? I became aware that what I had done at the wedding had started a series of uncontrollable occurrences. My brother's wife and their unborn child were the first innocent people caught in the crossfire, and that was all I could do at this point. I looked to my wife as we walked into our house. I said, "I appreciate you being here and helping me through this whole thing." She gave me a gentle kiss while grinning. "Never," she answered. "Remember that we are a team." I nodded, appreciating her steadfast assistance. At least I knew I wouldn't have to face it alone, no matter what happened next. But I couldn't stop thinking as I lay in bed that night, unable to fall asleep. What would happen tomorrow, and how many more lives would be impacted by the truth I had let loose? Second update. Since my last report 2 weeks ago, a lot has happened in the scenario. Even though I'm still processing everything, I feel obligated to tell you what has transpired. As I previously stated, my brother's wife contacted me in an attempt to get the truth about the events that transpired between my brother and my ex-girlfriend 6 years prior. I told her everything when we first met. To put it mildly, the talk was challenging. She contacted me again a week later, her voice emotional and tremulous. She said, "Can we get together again? I don't know who else to turn to, and I need to talk to someone." The following day, my wife and I met her at the same cafe. I was astonished by her appearance. I was concerned because she appeared even more worn out than previously, with pale skin and black circles under her eyes, especially considering how far along she was in her pregnancy. She began speaking as soon as she took a seat. With trembling hands she added, "I confronted him. I asked him to be honest with me, and I told him what you told me." In the hopes that my brother had finally made up his mind, I held my breath. Naturally though, that was too much to ask for. She went on, her voice hardly audible above a whisper. "He denied everything. He accused you of lying, claiming that you've always envied him, and attempting to destroy his life. He even implied that you might be the one who had the affair and that you're blaming him for it." I was furious, but my wife quietly pleaded with me to let my brother's wife finish. With tears in her eyes, she looked up at me and whispered, "I didn't believe him. I wanted to, but he seemed to be reading from a script based on his reaction. And he became irate when I asked him for specifics. He has never before become upset with me. I realized then that you were being honest." Although I was glad that she trusted me, I was sad for her and her unborn kid. "What will you do?" my wife inquired softly. I had seen that my brother's wife frequently made this action when she was under stress. Her hand moved to her belly. "I'm not sure," she said. "I just don't see how I can stay with him, and I've been thinking about it constantly." I tried to sound objective as I inquired, "Are you thinking about getting a divorce?" Slowly, she nodded. "I believe I must. Someone who can easily lie to me and to everyone else around him is not someone I can trust, and I cannot raise a child with them. How would that set an example for our child?" I was unable to refute her reasoning. I was impressed by her strength, if nothing else. My wife asked if you had spoken to a lawyer. The wife of my brother shook her head. "Not just yet. Before I did that, I wanted to make sure. To be sure I wasn't overreacting, I suppose I wanted to speak with you first." I told her, "You're not overreacting. My brother's actions constitute a grave betrayal of trust. Furthermore, it speaks something about his character that he is still lying about it today." She wiped away a tear and nodded. "I understand. I simply never imagined that I would find myself in this situation, considering divorce while pregnant. It has the plot of a lousy movie." Squeezing her hand, my wife extended her arm. She said, "You're not alone in this. We are here to support you in whatever you choose to do." I gave a nod of assent. "Yes, without a doubt. And not only for you, but also for the unborn child. Regardless of what transpires between you and my brother, that child is part of our family." We spoke about her alternatives for the next hour. In order to understand her rights, particularly with regard to custody of the child, my wife advised that she speak with an attorney. I offered to assist her in locating a qualified therapist, who could assist her in processing her feelings and making rational decisions. My brother's wife appeared calmer and more focused as our meeting came to a conclusion. She remarked, "I believe I know what I need to do. I need to do what's best for me and my baby, even though it won't be easy." We bid her farewell with hugs and vowed to keep in touch. I experienced a range of feelings as we watched her leave, including relief that the truth was known, pity for her suffering, and rage at my brother. My wife broke the stillness on the way home. "Are you aware that this isn't finished? When your parents and brother learn that she is thinking about getting a divorce, they will respond." I let out a sigh. I understand. To be honest, I'm trying not to think about it. "We have to be ready," she added. "They may attempt to hold you accountable for this. Are you prepared for that?" I considered it for a while. I reached out to hold my wife's hand and said, "We'll face whatever comes up together, right?" She gave my hand a squeeze. "Never," she answered. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that we were about to experience something significant as soon as we drew into our driveway. My parents would surely have something to say regarding my brother's wife's divorce proceedings. The wife of my brother was contemplating a divorce. Without a doubt, my parents would become involved. And me, I was at the center of everything. But I felt like I was on the right side of things for the first time in years. With my wife by my side and the assurance that we were doing morally, I was prepared to confront the truth, no matter what came next. For the first time in a long time, I felt strong. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but ponder what the consequences might be as I laid in bed that night. What would my brother think if he found out that his wife was actually thinking about leaving him? Whose side would my parents choose this time? Time will tell, I suppose. However, I am certain of one thing. I will not allow the truth to be suppressed once more. Not now. Third update. Since my last update, which was a month ago, things have drastically changed. The decision to file for divorce has been made by my brother's wife. Last week, she informed me over the phone in a steady, resolute voice. She remarked, "I've given it a lot of thought. I've spoken with a therapist and a lawyer. After everything that has transpired, I am unable to remain in this marriage." I was concerned about her future, but I was also happy that she was advocating for herself. She interrupted me when I voiced my worries about her raising the child by herself. "I'm positive," she stated confidently. "I would rather handle this alone than bring up my child in a home where lies are the norm. Both of us are worthy of better." She is currently living with her parents after moving out. My brother will shortly receive the divorce papers. My father called me out of the blue 2 days after that call. This was the first time we had spoken since the wedding. He sounded exhausted as he said, "Son, we need to talk. Your sibling is in disarray. He claims that you're responsible for everything and that you have been telling his wife falsehoods." I could feel my temper building. "Dad, those aren't lies. You are aware of what he did. You've known all along." After a long silence, my father's emotionally charged voice came back. "I understand. I should have handled things differently back then. As should your mother. We were wrong to insist that you pardon him." I was taken aback. Neither of my parents had ever acknowledged their mistakes before. "My brother wasn't managing the situation well," my father continued. "He has been drinking a lot," my dad stated. "He came to our house and said that you had destroyed his life. To try to resolve everything, your mother wants to call a family meeting," he continued. "Would you think about attending?" I felt conflicted. I had a part that wanted to say no, to stop the family drama. Another aspect, though, seemed odd. I had assumed it had died years ago. Finally, I said, "I'll give it some thought, but I'm not promising anything." I shared both chats with my wife after the call. After paying close attention, she questioned, "What are you going to do?" I gave a headshake. "I'm not sure. A part of me wants to simply get rid of everything." She concluded for me, "But another part wants to go to the family meeting." I gave a nod. She believed I should go, which surprised me. She remarked, "This has been looming over your head for 6 years. Perhaps this is your opportunity to finally face it directly and put it to rest." "What if it simply exacerbates the situation?" I inquired. She answered, "Then at least you'll know you tried. And I'll be right there with you no matter what." That's the current situation. The wife of my brother is submitting a divorce petition. My sibling is going downhill. Additionally, I'm thinking of attending a family gathering that might either mend or reopen old scars. I have no idea what will occur. A part of me is afraid to face my family and all the hurt and rage that have been brewing for years. However, I also have a hopeful side. Perhaps that's a bold phrase, but I feel like my family has a chance for true honesty for the first time in years. I am confident that my wife will back me no matter what. And I know that by sticking to the truth, however difficult it may be, I'm doing the right thing. If I choose to attend the family gathering, I'm not sure if I'll provide another update. However, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who has read these updates and provided guidance and support. Although it has been a challenging path, it has been so much easier to know that I am not alone. Good luck to me. I suspect that I will require it. My husband confessed to having an affair with my sister. Just as I found out I was pregnant, what should I do? I am 35F, and I have been married to my spouse, Henry, 37M, for 5 years. Our marriage seemed to be going well until my spouse suddenly admitted to having an affair with my sister. We both work as doctors at a large university hospital, you see. Outsiders may find that glamorous or satisfying, but it also adds a layer of complexity to our relationship. Our marriage hasn't always been picture perfect because of the long hours, the emotional toll of caring for patients, and the fact that we both have a strong passion for what we do. It has been challenging to balance our personal lives with our careers, and there have been times when the demands of our work have made things much more challenging. However, we were able to help one another through it all. He was my companion, and I never doubted for a moment that I would be with him for the rest of my life. Actually, I found out I was pregnant 2 months ago. Henry and I were excited to have children when we initially got married. Despite our best efforts and dreams, it simply never occurred for us. Even though we tried for a long time. We eventually came to terms with it. We gave up on making an effort, reasoning that if it was meant to be, it would come naturally. It was difficult to let go of that dream, but we put all of our effort into our relationships and occupations, believing that destiny would lead the way. I therefore refrained from drawing conclusions right away when I started getting morning sickness. A part of me assumed it might simply be work-related stress. In order to rule out the possibility, I nevertheless made the decision to take a pregnancy test. I was blown away when the test came back positive. It was such a time of great excitement and incredulity. I never imagined that I would be looking at that small test and knowing I was pregnant after all these years. Waves of emotions swept over me, and I had to take a seat to come to terms with the fact that I was pregnant. It was a mixture of wonder and happiness. My first instinct at the time was to tell Henry the news. After everything we'd gone through together, I knew how much this would mean to him. However, he was away at the time for a number of medical conferences. I chose to wait until he came back to tell him in person since this information was too crucial to convey over the phone or in a brief text message. I was aware that witnessing his response firsthand would heighten the significance of the situation. I had everything sorted out just right for the day Henry was due back from his trip. When I received the amazing news that I was expecting, I wanted to make the occasion extra special. I made lunch for us at our favorite restaurant, which we often frequented on special occasions or when we simply needed a little alone time. It was peaceful, comfortable, and stocked with all the foods we both enjoyed, so it was a place that carried many memories for us. As I thought about how this would be the beginning of a new chapter in our life, I tried to picture his reaction when I broke the news to him. However, I could tell right away that something wasn't right when I went to pick him up at the airport. Henry appeared distracted, seemingly absorbed in his thoughts. His greeting was different from his normal one. He didn't give me a warm embrace or show pleasure at seeing me after a long time apart. I could sense the disconnect in his manner, and he hardly even said hello. I attempted to dismiss it, speculating that perhaps he had been affected by the lengthy flights or the pressure of the conference. In an attempt to cheer him up and give us a chance to catch up, I brought up the reservation at our favorite restaurant. To my astonishment, however, he sighed, clearly annoyed, and suggested that we probably just go home and cancel. He sounded abrasive, as though the thought irritated him. I was surprised by his response. Since we didn't have any other important arrangements for the day, I figured that a lovely lunch would be the perfect way to help him relax. I told him that it would be better to have a brief lunch out and then go home because we would most likely wind up ordering takeout anyhow. He nodded curtly and let out an angry groan. Then, as though I hadn't been there, he resumed staring at his phone and distractedly scrolling while I took us to the restaurant. The tension between us was heavy by the time we arrived at the restaurant. Henry didn't say much as we sat down at the table. I questioned him about the conference in an attempt to start a conversation and diffuse the tension. His answers were one-word answers that didn't lead anywhere. They were brief, aloof and chilly. He was very different from that. Usually, following these excursions, he would tell tales of the individuals he encountered, the thought-provoking discussions he attended, or the novel concepts he discovered. However, he seemed to be keeping something back this time, and I couldn't help but wonder what was actually happening. To be fair, I had observed a minor change in Henry's conduct over the previous few weeks. He had begun to seem aloof before our lunch that day. Although I was a little worried, I dismissed it as the typical stress that comes with being a doctor. At first I didn't give it much thought because our professions are hard and frequently leave us exhausted both physically and psychologically. Because of the demands of our jobs, we had both experienced difficult periods in the past, so I figured this was simply another one. I kept telling myself that after his conference, he would feel better and we would return to our regular routine, and that he would finally open up after things had calmed down. However, I started to feel increasingly nervous as I sat across from him at lunch that day. Seeing him not recognize me and hardly speak. I made an effort to ignore my nervousness though. Even though we were at odds, I was anxious to inform him about the baby since I had waited long enough to do so. I hoped that by telling him about the pregnancy, he would suddenly stop worrying about whatever was hurting him and we could both enjoy this moment that would change our lives. Henry looked up from his plate just as I was getting up the nerve to tell him, just as I was ready to break the best news of our lives. He spoke in a calm, low voice, saying what I never thought I would hear. "I have been unfaithful to you." I didn't really pay attention to what he said at first. For a moment I believed I had misheard the clatter of talking and clinking dishes that filled the restaurant. I laughed nervously and said, "To what?" As though he had said something incorrectly. Then he looked me in the eyes, something he hadn't really done all day, and said it again, more clearly this time, in a tone that was almost emotionless. I've been having sex with Emma, your sister. The world around me seemed to stop at that very instant. My face became numb. My sister and my husband were having an affair. Emma. My sister, of all people. I gazed at him, trying to make sense of what he had said. "What do you mean?" I questioned him again, even though I knew in my heart. Even though I didn't want to believe it, his expression made it obvious. He simply sat there and looked directly at me with such a detached and dispassionate air, as if this were just another truth he was stating, something trivial and unimportant. The man I believed I knew, the man I had loved and trusted for so many years, was nowhere to be seen, and there was no regret. Everything I had known, including our marriage, our relationship and even my own sister, seemed to be disintegrating before my very eyes, and I had no control over it. I could feel the sting of betrayal in the pit of my breast, and tears started to fill up in my eyes. "When did it start?" I questioned him in a shaky voice. I had to know. Some part of me hoped that perhaps this was all an error or misunderstanding, but I wasn't sure why. Almost casually, he started telling me about his and Emma's several months of sleeping together. With every syllable, my heart fell deeper. He clarified that it all began when Emma ended her relationship with her previous boyfriend. After the separation, she was inconsolable and had begun visiting our home regularly to get assistance. I can still clearly recall those times. In an effort to support her during such a trying time, I had invited her into our house. I believed we were aiding in her recovery since she was my sister. I had no idea, though, that Henry and Emma were growing closer behind my back in ways I could never have predicted. Yes, they had been friendly from the beginning. At the time, I really recall thinking it was wonderful that my sister and my husband got along so well. Knowing how close our family was to one another comforted me. However, I never imagined they were close, that they were sharing a bed, not even in my worst dreams. The enormity of the betrayal from both of them was too much for me to comprehend. I could feel my surroundings becoming hazy as Henry went on to describe his affair. He was no longer someone I wanted to hear. Nothing made sense. I thought I was about to get sick as my stomach rumbled. I snatched my keys from the table and sprang to my feet. The fact that we were in the center of a packed restaurant didn't bother me. The possibility that people were observing didn't bother me. I simply needed to leave. As I hurried to the exit to locate my car, Henry began calling after me. I didn't see my phone buzzing till I was in the car and heading home. Of course it was Henry. He contacted me again, reprimanding me for leaving him at the restaurant and for overreacting in front of everyone, rather than offering an apology. I yelled into the phone for him to leave me alone and take an Uber. As I drove home, my heart broken and my mind racing, I could hardly see the road through my tears. I shut myself in our bedroom as soon as I arrived home. I started crying hysterically at that point because the truth of what had just transpired hit me hard. I was unable to comprehend it. My own sister and my spouse, the man I loved. How could they have betrayed me in this manner? I sobbed till my body was totally worn out and I had no more tears to shed. Henry must have returned to the house at some time. His voice was muffled by the wood when I heard him knock on the bedroom door. I couldn't stand him. Even though he insisted on talking. I was no longer able to listen to him. I curled up in a ball on the bed, my sobs smearing the pillow, refusing to open the door. I must have slept off at some point, but I'm not sure how long I remained that way. It was already midnight when I awoke. Henry had ceased hammering, and the house was oddly quiet. I was so hungry that I made the decision to go downstairs and buy some food. Henry was dozing off on the couch when I arrived in the living room, and his phone was on the table beside him. My blood boiled when I saw him sleeping there, appearing so content. After what he had just told me, how could he sleep so soundly? After standing there for a while, fuming with rage and shock, I turned to look at his phone. This was something I had never done in our whole marriage. However, I unlocked Henry's phone for the first time that evening. He was so certain that I wouldn't ever suspect him that he hadn't even bothered to change his passcode, which he had always used. He was so confident that I would always trust him. How foolish I had been. How could I have failed to notice what was going on right in front of me? My heart pounded as my sister and I went through his messages, dreading what we may discover but still having to know the whole truth. And there it was. They had exchanged several offensive pictures, each more agonizing to view than the one before. Pictures of my own sister and my husband smiling, making jokes, and organizing their covert meetings. They had even made plans to meet at different hotels while I was totally unaware of it. What broke me the most were Emma's texts. She had written in one of them about how thrilling it was to have sex with him behind my back and how the excitement of lying enhanced their relationship. She even went so far as to claim that it improved the quality of the intercourse. It was unbelievable to me that this was genuine. I had grown up with and trusted my own sister, and she had deceived me in the worst way. And our marriage was so easily ruined by Henry, the man I had promised to be with for the rest of my life. I had to have proof of what I had witnessed, so I snapped pictures of their messages on my own phone while my hands were shaking. I went back upstairs in silence after getting what I needed. I started packing. I was aware that I couldn't live in the same house as Henry. I couldn't bring up this child with a husband who had betrayed me and so severely damaged my trust. In an attempt to keep myself together, I packed a few necessities in a bag, but my hands trembled with each thing I put in and my heart was racing. After finishing, I drove directly to my parents' home, which was located in a different town. My parents were shocked to see me when I got to their house, but I couldn't tell them anything straight away. Fortunately, they didn't ask many questions that evening. I simply told them that I needed to remain with them for a bit. I've been residing with my parents ever since that evening. Yes, I am in the process of ending my relationship with Henry. After all of this, I haven't spent any time in getting a divorce. After being betrayed, there is no turning back. After learning of everything, my parents are also incensed and have cut Emma off entirely. She is no longer welcome in our family, and they are ashamed of what she did. Emma has repeatedly called me to express her regret, saying that it was all a big mistake. However, I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive her. Ironically, Henry's family has been incredibly supportive, especially given that their own kid is to blame for this problem. They made it apparent that they were extremely disappointed in him as soon as they learned of his adultery. They have made a strong stand and disapprove of what he has done. He has been informed that they will not allow my sister into their family. They haven't tried to hide their distaste. It's as if they now recognize Henry for who he really is. Update. Since many of you have been inquiring about the nature of my connection with Emma and the reasons behind my sister's actions against me, let me clarify a few things. What can I say? Throughout our childhood, we had what I believe to be a typical sibling connection. Our parents loved us both equally, and none of us was the golden child of the family. There were never any serious arguments or jealousies between us. This stings even more because I have always loved my sister no matter what. I honestly worried about her when she went through her breakup 6 months ago. I am not blind to the irony that Emma's ex was discovered cheating on her with a coworker. I wanted to be there for her as her big sister because she was in complete despair. To help her recover and get back on her feet, I proposed that she remain with us for a bit. Remembering how she would confide in me about her trust concerns following her breakup is what's really getting to me right now. While she was sleeping with my husband, she would sob on my shoulder and tell me that she could never contemplate doing to someone what her ex had done to her. There are simply no adequate words to describe the degree of manipulation. Emotionally, the pregnancy has been challenging. I am reminded to share these events with my husband whenever I have a doctor's appointment or develop a new ailment. I'm dealing with this alone instead. Well, not totally alone. My parents have been amazing, And a few of my hospital co-workers have really come through for me. The impact this has had on our work lives is unexpected. Fortunately, Henry and I work in different departments at the same hospital. News of what transpired spread really quickly, and although most individuals have been professional, it's obvious whose side they support. Emma's response to everything has been especially startling. She appears to be very shocked that our parents have interrupted her. She continues to send them lengthy emails in which she emphasizes the importance of family unity and how she is still their daughter. After she made the terrible decision to betray her own sister, Mom eventually lost it and responded to Emma, telling her that yes, family should be together, which is precisely why they are supporting me. I appreciate how supportive Henry's family has been. In particular, his mother has been amazing. She has made it plain that I will always be a member of their family, regardless of what happens with Henry, and she calls me frequently to see how I and the baby are doing. She told me that she is really ashamed of her son's behavior and that she taught him better than this. Concentrating on my child is what's enabling me to proceed. Every time I see them on an ultrasound or feel them move, it serves as a reminder that even the most dire circumstances can yield something lovely. Even though I'm still afraid of becoming a single mother, I know it's preferable to remaining in a marriage with someone who could completely deceive me. After learning about my pregnancy, I'm relieved Emma broke up with Henry. Unfortunately, he lost her as well. The man had the gall to end our marriage in the hopes of getting away with a younger me. Naturally, this does not imply that I will ever forgive Emma, but I am relieved that Henry is now alone. I'm taking each day as it comes for the time being. Despite all the stress, I'm attempting to concentrate on keeping my pregnancy healthy while the divorce proceedings proceed. I'm thankful to everyone who has helped me along the way, and I'm gradually realizing that sometimes the family you select is more resilient than the one you were born into. I have no idea what the future may bring, but I do know that my child and I both deserve better than what Henry and Emma did to us. Update 2: Henry made the decision to visit my parents' house once more in an attempt to make things better, but this time the situation worsened. He began by attempting to persuade me to reconcile. He explained to me that parents must occasionally give up something for their kids. He continued by saying that our child deserved to have two parents rather than just one. However, I had had enough of this story. I told him straight out that he didn't even *1* this baby until recently. For heaven's sake, he had wished for me to miscarry. And all of a sudden, he's talking about the value of sacrifice and family. He attempted to change his mind when I threw that in his face, claiming that perhaps he would change his mind after holding the kid. Like all his previous promises, his words were empty. I confronted him directly. He had an affair with my sister. We had almost little possibility of ever reconciling. However, Henry chose to turn the tables on me rather than take accountability. He began to blame me for his affair, claiming that I was constantly preoccupied with work and that I had not shown him affection for months. This was typical Henry, always attempting to place the blame elsewhere and make me feel responsible for his treachery. Before we were married, he was well aware of who I was. Before we met, we had worked together for years, so why was he acting so startled now? He began complaining about Emma at that point. He accused me of failing to recognize that he had been unfaithful to me for months and said that she had failed to support him when he was feeling weak. He seemed to be apologizing to me for not spotting him in the act sooner. By this time, I was furious. I bluntly informed him that he should quit blaming me for his adultery. His own parents, who had sided with me for a reason, were aware that what he had done was unacceptable. Henry sneered, his haughtiness returning, and declared that his parents loved him and would always forgive him. I was unable to contain myself at that point. I was honest with him, telling him that his parents had already chosen to deny him his inheritance and were done with him. Furthermore, our infant was receiving all of that money rather than him. When he realized, I saw his face fall apart. He was speechless for the first time since it all started. In a moment, his typical self-assurance and smugness disappeared. To be honest, I did get a sense of fulfillment from seeing him consider the repercussions of his behavior. He began screaming at me, calling me nasty and vile for ruining his life and expressing his regret that he had cheated on me earlier. Since this whole argument was becoming meaningless, I simply shook my head and requested him to go. Henry then became quite near to me and began yelling, which really unnerved me. At this time my parents, who had attempted to keep me in the other room, heard Henry's loud statements and came out to see how I was doing. My dad quickly came over and yanked Henry away when he realized that he was only inches from my face and that I was flinching. I saw my father strike Henry across the face. At first, Henry was confused and unable to comprehend what had just transpired. Then my dad, who was much taller than him, took hold of his collar, pulled him out, and pushed him out the door. I heard my father threatening him aloud that it would be his last day on earth if he ever revealed his face to us again. Henry has been completely silent for days after that. I suppose everything has really shook him up. Now that he hasn't texted or called, I can finally relax. I'm so appreciative that my father defended me, and I'm eager to get a divorce from this awful man and permanently end this phase of my life. Update 3. My previous update was 8 months ago. For those who have been following my journey, I just wanted to let you know how things are doing. Regarding my pregnancy, my daughter is doing well after I gave birth. In addition to continuing to see me, Henry's parents have established a trust fund for her. They have cut Henry off from the family and don't want anything to do with him. I have full custody of my child and have finally achieved the divorce I desired. For the time being, Henry's only duty is to pay child support. He paid a large amount of alimony because of his affair, but he didn't argue with me about anything during the divorce process. Henry made an effort to portray himself as a changed guy who merited partial custody during the custody proceedings. The judge, however, was unimpressed when his own parents testified about his actions and offered proof of his early rejection of the pregnancy, including his terrible yearning for a miscarriage. The best gift Emma could have given me after everything she did for me is that, although she still occasionally texts me, she hasn't disturbed me much overall. She attempted to get in touch with someone last month via a common friend, stating that she was interested in seeing her niece. I quickly shut that down. Despite being the biological aunt of my kid, she forfeited her right to participate in our lives when she decided to have an affair with my husband. The actual birth was a touching event. In fact, my mother and Henry's mother were in the delivery room with me. She swore to make sure her granddaughter would always know she was loved, despite her father's actions, and it was a wonderful moment as she held her for the first time. By making frequent visits and being the kind of grandma every child deserves, she has fulfilled her commitment. The most lovely thing that has emerged from this entire catastrophe is my kid. Fortunately, she doesn't look much like Henry, and she has my eyes. Every significant event, like her first giggle or grin, serves as a reminder that leaving was the right choice. Sharing these priceless moments with someone who had so severely betrayed me was unthinkable. Henry's parents have provided him with more than enough financial assistance. In addition to creating the trust fund, they have insisted on paying for all of my medical bills and assisting me in starting a college fund. Their grandchild should never have to rely on Henry for anything, they stated. Regarding Henry, he hasn't been around much, which is just how I want it. Beyond that, he hasn't shown much desire in being a father. He pays his child support on time, most likely because his parents are looking. He has reportedly been attempting to get back together with Emma, but she has reportedly moved to a different state and doesn't want to interact with him, according to mutual friends. Throughout it all, my parents have been my pillars of support. My dad, who has never been very emotional, becomes very mushy with his granddaughter, and they have assisted me in setting up a lovely nursery. Even after going through such betrayal, it is consoling to realize how much love is all around us. Considering everything that has transpired, I genuinely believe that I'm in a better place now. Though it no longer defines me, the betrayal still stings when I consider it. I'm not merely a woman who has had her sister and husband cheat on her. In addition to being a mother and a successful doctor, I reconstructed my life according to my own standards. I'm concentrating on my daughter's development and our new life together for the time being. Although it's not the life I had in mind, it's better than I could have ever dreamed of when I was attempting to work things out with Henry. Tricked into buying a house for my sister, I finally stopped being the family ATM and took back control of my life. This story has been consuming me for the past few months and I, 32M, need to tell it. It tells the story of how my parents tricked me into purchasing a home for them, then gave it to my younger sister Perry, 29F, and what transpired when I finally had enough. Be advised that this is a lengthy and intricate tale of financial exploitation, family deception, and ultimately defending oneself. My family had to constantly balance their finances when I was growing up. Even though we weren't impoverished, there was always a tension that was related to money. You could call my dad, 58M, a serial entrepreneur, but none of his business endeavors ever truly took off. He constantly pursued the next great chance, jumping from job to job. He would be selling life insurance one month, certain that he would succeed in the field, and then attempting to launch a home remodeling company the next, despite his lack of experience. Every new endeavor had the same cycle: initial enthusiasm, mounting annoyance, and unavoidable failure. The perpetual optimist, Mom, 55F, consistently supported Dad's decisions. She would say to us over dinner, "Your father is a visionary," just after he had left another secure career to take a chance on a dangerous project. He only needs one significant break. To keep us afloat, she took on part-time jobs, But her true job was to keep up this facade of normalcy while our financial circumstances were anything but. My sister Perry and I had a very different dynamic. I was chosen at a young age to be the family's savior and their key to a brighter future. I used this lens to examine every choice I made. I recall wanting to join the school band when I was 14 years old. My parents sat me down for a serious conversation about how the computer club would appear better on college applications, rather than encouraging my passion in music. My parents, who somehow always found money we purportedly didn't have, paid for Perry's art classes one month and her dance lessons the next, allowing her to follow whatever whimsy interests she had. In high school, the pressure increased significantly. I kept my GPA at 4.0 because it was considered bad, not because I was inherently smart. You would think I had committed a heinous sin after I received an A in AP Physics one semester. For days, my father would only talk to me when he made scathing remarks about how mediocrity isn't an option for someone who needs to support their family. Teenagers need to express themselves, Mom said dismissively when Perry skipped 3 days of school that week to spend time with her pals. Perry was finding herself, and I spent my high school years in this pressure cooker of expectations. I was supposed to create a thorough financial success strategy. Perry would easily go in beyond curfew without any repercussions, whereas I would study until 2 in the morning while fueled by energy drinks and anxiousness. It was a sharp contrast. The traditional education system just doesn't suit her learning style, was the response given to Perry's run of D's and F's, while my B+ in calculus prompted a family conference regarding my declining standards. My parents made it apparent that my only choice when it came time for college was tech school, not because it fit with my hobbies, they never inquired about those, but rather because it provided the quickest path to a well-paying career. At every stage, they made sure I realized the extent of their sacrifice by taking out loans and spending down what little savings they had. Mom used to say, "We're eating ramen so you can have a future." But oddly, there was always money for Perry's newest pastime or adventure. Tech school was harsh due to the continual pressure from home as well as the challenging homework. I lived on the cheapest possible diet, worked part-time at a computer repair business in between classes, and was constantly reminded of my parents' investment in me. Every phone conversation featured an update on their financial difficulties as well as overt clues about when I might be able to reimburse them. Perry, meanwhile, left high school during her last year. In fact, my parents applauded her choice rather than the drama I would have experienced. "Not everyone is cut out for school," they stated. "She is courageous for pursuing her own goals." She spent the following years exploring her options, which included working as a barista, store clerk, dog walker and yoga instructor trainee, all of which were part-time positions that lasted no longer than a few months. Until she eventually quit because it wasn't fulfilling her soul, every new job she took was hailed as her genuine calling. I was hired by a burgeoning tech startup after I graduated from computer school. Although the pay wasn't particularly noteworthy by industry standards, it was more than my family had ever received. I recall phoning my parents to break the news, hoping for a single, unadulterated moment of joy. Rather, Dad started figuring out how much I could give them per month right away, and Mom started making a list of all the bills they needed assistance with. To save money, I moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. Although it wasn't ideal, I was earning enough money to buy a home of my own. I felt compelled to live simply in order to support my parents. I tried to balance their needs with my student loan payments and other living expenditures by sending them money each month. However, it was never sufficient. Dad would call with a remorseful speech about how they had given up everything for my schooling if I didn't send an extra month. My work became my haven. I poured myself into projects, gained a reputation for solving challenging issues, and began to advance in the company. Every bonus or promotion ought to have been a triumph, but instead they served as further sources of pressure. "So, you'll be able to help us more now, right?" was the constant inquiry, rather than "Are you proud of yourself?" or "What are your goals?" Perry's pattern of irregular employment and snap judgments persisted. When things went apart, she would return home after living with friends. She would enroll in online classes but stop midway through. Our parents were understanding and supportive of every setback. Despite the fact that she was well into her 20s, they would exclaim, "She's still young. She simply hasn't discovered her calling yet." What I assumed would be a typical Sunday meal at their rental apartment was actually the pivotal moment. Although I had been picking up on more clues than usual regarding their financial difficulties, I wasn't ready for what happened next. After all these years of investing in the family's future, Dad began to talk about how tired they were of renting, how their landlord was raising the rent once more, and how they needed a place of their own. The directness still took me by surprise, even though I understood where this was going. "Honey, we've been thinking," Mom replied, reaching across the table and taking my hand. "We've given up so much for you to reach this point, and you're doing fantastically now. Do you not think it's time to assist us in purchasing a home?" They let go of years' worth of pent-up guilt when I revealed that I was struggling to pay my own rent and save for the future. Dad talked about how they could have invested in me rather than saving for retirement. Mom sobbed as she talked about how all they wanted in their last years was stability. Perry, who was residing with them at the time, said that I was living comfortably while our parents were having financial difficulties. Months passed during the pressure campaign. They casually mentioned places they had seen in every phone conversation. Dad would share tales of their friends' kids who had done right by their parents by purchasing properties, while Mom would email ads just to look at. Perry even got involved, writing to me to say that after everything our parents had done for me, they deserved this one thing. Despite my best efforts, I was susceptible to their manipulation due to decades of indoctrination. The guilt became too much. Their age, their sacrifices, and their need for stability would keep me up at night. Though years of familial dynamics are difficult to overcome, my therapist, yes, I did finally start seeing one, warned me about setting limits. I finally gave in after months of psychological combat. I persuaded myself that this was the proper thing to do even though I had saved up a respectable sum for a down payment, money that ought to have gone toward my own future. The guilt trips would end once they had a home, I promised myself. At last, they would be content and I could begin to concentrate on my own life. I purchased a basic 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, nothing extravagant. The monthly payments were difficult, but I reasoned that if I kept up my thrifty lifestyle and lived with roommates, I could manage. Everything appeared to be going well for the first several months. My parents were ecstatic, telling friends and relatives how well their son had done them and showing off their home. However, the requests increased rather than decreased. They wanted to landscape the backyard because the neighbors would judge us, and they required new furniture because the old stuff doesn't seem right in this magnificent house. Every request was accompanied by the same old guilt trip. "After everything we've done for you." I continued to pay my mortgage, sending more when I could in an effort to pay it off sooner. I convinced myself that it was worthwhile to provide my parents with the security they had never had, even if I was still living with roommates and putting my own life on hold. They began discussing how nice it would be for Perry to have a secure location close by, and they made casual references to how she was assisting them in settling in, but I chose to ignore the warning flags. In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. I was so used to prioritizing their demands that I failed to notice all the warning signs. The events that followed compelled me to face the ugly truth of my family's relationships and make one of the most difficult choices of my life. Update 1. I'll tell you what transpired when I paid a surprise visit to the house I purchased. I wish I could say I was shocked by what I discovered, but perhaps I had a sneaking suspicion this kind of stuff was coming. It all began one weekend when I attempted to phone my folks to talk about the additional mortgage payments I had been making. They never missed an opportunity to discuss money, so it was strange that neither of them answered. I made multiple efforts before deciding to drive to the residence. Everything changed because of what I discovered there. Wearing pajamas as if she owned the home, Perry answered the door. She didn't say, "Hey, nice to see you," or even, "What's brought you here?" Rather, she asked, "Oh, what are you doing here?" With an irritated expression, as though I were breaking her schedule. As I stood there, I tried to take in everything I was seeing. I felt sick to my stomach when I entered. The entire house has been converted into Perry's private area. Her personal portraits had taken the place of our family photos on the walls, her clothes were draped over the furniture and her art supplies were strewn all over the table that had once been our parents' dining room table. She was allegedly now a budding social media personality, and the spare room had been transformed into some sort of creative studio for her latest business endeavor. "Where's Dad and Mom?" I was able to inquire while attempting to remain calm. She answered nonchalantly, as though everyone knew, "Oh, they moved out a few weeks ago. Across town, they discovered a pleasant rental. Did they not inform you?" Certainly they hadn't informed me. No one had considered mentioning that Perry had moved in and my parents had left, even though I had been making extra mortgage payments on this place. I felt like I was physically struck by the betrayal. I contacted my folks while seated on the couch, which was now adorned with Perry's throw cushions. This time, Mom responded, and her justification infuriated me. "We planned to inform you, honey. We believed this would be the ideal setting for Perry, who required a steady setting to concentrate on her career. You're doing great, and she needs time to figure out what she wants to do." Mom's voice took on that recognizable guilt-tripping tone when I brought up the fact that I was the one making the mortgage payments. "Can't you help your sister after all we've given up for you? Your additional payments will be used to cover our new rent. Everything remains within the family. I lost it at that point. Remains with family? I didn't buy this house to give Perry a free crash pad. I bought it for you and Dad. And without notifying me, you're paying your rent with my extra mortgage payments? In an attempt to manipulate me, Mom broke down in tears and said that I was being self-centered and that family members should support one another. After I obtained my IT job, Dad got on the phone and started lecturing me about how I've changed and gotten materialistic. The actual kicker? The majority of their furniture had already been transferred into their new rental, leaving Perry with the more recent pieces I had assisted them in purchasing for the property. I was the one who was really footing the bill, and they had planned this entire event without ever contacting me. I'm focusing on building my brand right now, Perry responded with a shrug when I questioned her about her involvement in the mortgage. She replied, I'll be able to help out once I get my social media following up, as she opened a new ring light that she was probably buying with the additional cash I'd been giving for the mortgage. I alternated between anger and incredulity during the drive home. The family first lectures, guilt trips and years of manipulation were all meant to keep me footing the bill while I put my own life on hold. I've been allowing myself a few days to calm down and gather my thoughts before deciding what to do next. A part of me wants to halt all payments right away and let them face the repercussions. Fighting against years of training and worrying about being the bad son who left his family is another aspect. However, one thing is certain, this cannot go on. I have had enough of being the family ATM. This weekend, I've planned a meeting with my parents to establish some clear guidelines. Perry must either start making a sizable mortgage payment or something will need to change. I'll provide another report following the meeting, but I already have a feeling it won't be pleasant. My parents are skilled manipulators of emotions, and I have no doubt that they are already preparing their case. But for the first time in my life, I'm prepared to defend my position, even if it means playing the antagonist in their tale. I'm aware of the irony. My sister lives rent-free in a home I pay for, but I continue to share a room with her. I sometimes question how I allowed things to get to this point, but I suppose that's what happens when you're subjected to manipulation and guilt from your family for years. Update 2. Things didn't go as planned when I confronted my folks. In fact, it went worse than I had anticipated. Allow me to describe what transpired during one of the most tense family gatherings I have ever experienced. When I got to their new rental apartment, I found that it was considerably more costly than their old one. I saw a big TV and some new furniture as soon as I came in. I could now pinpoint the precise source of my additional mortgage payments. They had purposefully scheduled this meeting for a family meal, presumably in the hopes that I wouldn't object when food was involved. In hindsight, I should have anticipated that they would work against me, but Perry was also present, which was not in my original plan. They started their plan before I could even begin to talk about the house problem. My favorite childhood supper was made by Mom, Emotional Manipulation 101, and Dad began displaying old pictures of me while discussing simpler times when family meant everything. I made an effort to direct the discussion toward the real problem. We must discuss Perry's living situation and the house. The mood changed at once. Mom set her fork down. Dad's expression tightened. Her phone suddenly piqued Perry's curiosity. Observe, I began. I purchased that home for you and your father. Now that you've moved out and given it to Perry, you're paying your rent with my extra money. I wasn't told about any of this, and that needs to change. Dad went on the attack right away. You're keeping score now then? Following all that we have done for you? He produced a notebook, a real notebook, in which he had recorded all of the costs they had ever expended for my schooling. Should we discuss our expenses for your tech school? What did we give up? Mom, who can cry on command, I promise, adopted a different tack. Tears already welling up. Mom added tearfully, we thought you'd understand. Perry is having a hard time figuring out her path, and we just want both of our children to succeed. Isn't that what family does? Support each other? I'm actually working really hard on my social media presence. I've gained 200 followers this month. The house gives me the perfect backdrop for my content. My lifestyle influencer career is about to take off, Perry said, eventually looking up from her phone to share her viewpoint. Perry, you're living rent-free in a house I'm paying for while I'm still sharing an apartment with roommates. How is that fair? I was hearing, and I couldn't believe it. Not everything is about money. You're so privileged with your tech job, you don't understand how hard it is for creative people like me, she said, rolling her eyes. Then they delivered another bombshell. Mom hesitantly said they had already gotten quotations for the makeover and told Perry she could turn the garage into a content creation studio, expecting me to pay for it, of course. This stops now. Either Perry starts paying her fair share of the mortgage, or we need to figure out a different arrangement. I lost it at that moment. We put you through school. We sacrificed everything for your success, and now you're going to deny your sister the same chance," said Dad, slamming his hand on the table. "The same chance?" I chuckled sourly. "This isn't about chances, it's about responsibility. Perry left high school and has never worked for more than 3 months. How can you be so cruel? We raised you better than this. Perry needs stability to pursue her dreams," Mom said, her tears growing more intense. I yelled back, "What about my dreams? I've sacrificed everything for this family, including my own dreams, living with roommates, saving for the future and paying for a house I can't even live in." From there the debate got more heated as Dad began to enumerate all the sacrifices they had ever made for me. Mom continued to sob about her commitment to the family, and Perry accused me of being envious of her imminent success. "Starting next month, I'm only paying the basic mortgage, no extras." I finally made my ultimatum. If Perry wants to stay in the house, she needs to contribute. If not, we need to sell it. Mom complained that I was ruining the family, Dad branded me materialistic and ungrateful, and Perry stormed out, accusing me of ruining her career before it had even begun. You would think that I had suggested setting fire to an orphanage. On the journey home, I began to reflect on all the years I had spent trying to please them. All the sacrifices I'd made, all the guilt I'd carried, and for the first time, I realized how manipulative they were. I left that night feeling both exhausted and oddly free. Dad sent multiple angry texts about my betrayal, Perry has posted ambiguous social media updates about toxic family members, and dealing with haters, Mom has been calling nonstop and leaving heartfelt voicemails about how they can't afford their rent without my help, and I've already contacted the bank to stop the extra payments. I've been the family ATM for too long, putting everyone else's demands before my own, but I'm not giving up this time. If they can't see that, perhaps more serious measures are in order. For the first time in my life, I'm willing to put myself first, even if it means becoming the antagonist in their story, but I have a sense that this isn't quite over yet. Update 3. Let me tell you how everything finally fell apart and where I am now. Following that final encounter, I took the most difficult decision of my life. I stopped making mortgage payments altogether. My phone exploded in the first week after I stopped making payments. I received 47 calls from Mom, 23 from Dad, and even messages from Perry on every social media site imaginable. I blocked them all, but they got creative, using friends' phones, making new accounts on social media, and even reaching out to relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "I can't sleep knowing my son has abandoned us," was the first guilt-tripping statement in Mom's voicemails. "We'll lose everything because of you," was the next desperate statement. In his more combative communications, Dad said, "No son of mine would do this to his family." Of particular relevance was Perry's campaign against me on social media. She began sharing stories of toxic family members that ruin your dreams on a regular basis. The surrealist part was when I looked at Perry's Instagram and noticed that she was charging $50 per session for her insights into the influencer lifestyle, while holding creativity classes in the property I was paying for. She used my financial crisis as engagement material for her fans and turned the living room into a content-producing space. The bank sent out their first notice around week 3. My parents sent it to me with a single message instead of addressing the issue. "Is this what you want? To see your family homeless?" I archived the email without answering. The flying monkeys then appeared. I received calls from family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, expressing their disappointment with my decisions. I was ruining my parents' golden years, according to a long correspondence from my aunt. My former high school instructor even expressed concern about my recent changes in lifestyle on Facebook. None of them were aware that I had finally begun therapy and was recovering from years of emotional and financial abuse. My therapist assisted me in realizing that my family had established a situation in which I was always in charge of everyone's welfare except for my own. Perry's Rise Above Surviving Family Betrayal podcast, which was taped in a house I purchased, was the true turning point. The first episode focused on her affluent tech bro brother's jealous attempts to crush her goals. In fact, she was able to garner a modest following from those who understood her plight. The bank's notices grew more serious after the second month. My parents changed strategies and sent me pictures of homes they were considering, all of which were far less expensive than the rental they were renting at the time. Mom texted from a different number, "See, we're trying to compromise." However, I saw that Perry had not yet been asked to help or find a space of her own. Perry hosted a Farewell to My Dream Space broadcast, complete with theatrical monologues about overcoming adversity, in response to the approaching foreclosure. For her emergency relocation fund, she even created a GoFundMe page, carefully omitting the fact that she had never made any payments on the residence. Finding out that Perry had been renting out one of the rooms to another content provider and keeping the money for himself was the last straw. This came after Mom had called me in tears, explaining that they were unable to make any mortgage contributions. Perry had to quickly relocate her content development business back to our parents' rental when the bank eventually gained ownership of the house. She took care to record everything for her fans, portraying herself as a victim of uncontrollable events. I found it ironic that she never mentioned the true source of the house's funding. Dad gave me a final call, which I did answer. His voice was low, almost defeated rather than the rage I had anticipated. He remarked, "We really thought you'd cave. We never thought you'd actually let the house go." I learned all I needed to know about their perception of me from that admission. They saw me not as a son but as a steady source of revenue that they could control whenever they wanted. The fallout has been easier and harder than I anticipated. More difficult since there is a gap when you break off communication with your entire family, no matter how toxic they may be. It's easier since I'm solely accountable to myself for the first time in my adult life. I currently live in my own apartment. Though small, it belongs to me. Every choice I make is for my own future, not to satisfy the needs or desires of others. I'm finally considering purchasing a home for myself, this time just for me, as my savings account continues to increase. The family still makes an effort to get in touch now and again. Mom sends guilt-ridden, subtly accusatory holiday cards. Articles regarding unappreciative kids are emailed by Dad. Based on the drama in our family, Perry has reportedly remade herself as a trauma healing counselor. However, I'm finished. The sale of the house was about more than simply real estate. It was about escaping a lifetime of shame and exploitation. I've finally come to terms with the fact that sometimes establishing limits means playing the bad guy in someone else's tale. It's never too late to quit burning yourself alive to keep others warm if you're in a similar circumstance. The manipulation is more difficult than the guilt. But it's your life to live. Avoid waiting as long as I did to come to that realization. I want to thank everyone for their warm reactions and tremendous support. I learned from reading your comments that I'm not the only one who has to deal with financial exploitation in the family. I was strengthened by the accounts of so many of you who had gone through similar things. This community has been really encouraging and reassuring. Mom sided with stepdad and his kids, kicked me out, but they forgot that I own the house. Now it's time to take it back. It never occurred to me, 35M, that my father's meticulous estate planning would ultimately cause our family to fall apart. There's a lot to digest here, and I want to make sure I'm giving you the whole picture, so let me start at the beginning. One of the big tech businesses in Seattle employs me as a senior software architect. My dad always had this kind of job in mind for me. "Technology is the future," he would exclaim proudly after I was accepted to UW's computer science program. He had a profitable construction business and wasn't a techie, but he had a remarkable knack for predicting trends. Beginning with the recession of the late 1980s, Dad started his construction business from the ground up throughout some of the most difficult periods in the industry. He took on projects that other contractors wouldn't take on, using only a pickup truck and his tools. Back then, Mom told me, they lived in a small apartment and were frugal, but Dad had this unwavering faith in his vision. He would frequently remark, "The key is to build relationships, not just buildings." That way of thinking got him through his difficult early years. Dad's business was unique because of the way he treated both customers and staff. Even if it meant losing some bids to rivals who made exaggerated deadline promises, he was a firm believer in open pricing and truthful schedules. "First, establish trust," he would advise. He was correct when he said, "The profits will follow." His business, which was renowned for taking on intricate restoration projects requiring both technical expertise and historical sensitivity, rose to prominence in the Seattle area by the mid-1990s. Because of the devotion he had developed with his clients and staff, Dad's business survived the 2008 financial crisis, when many construction companies were failing. He didn't fire a single employee during that period. Rather, he reduced his personal income to zero and took out a second mortgage on his cherished Mustang. I learned more about leadership from watching him handle that issue than I could have from any management course. "Your employees are your extended family," he told me. "You take care of them, they'll take care of your business." I didn't realize at the time how much his managerial approach affected my own career. Many of his ideas were put to use when I was promoted to team lead at my software business. I established thorough documentation procedures for our code, much as he had kept thorough project logs for every building site. I was able to lead my development team through challenging project deadlines thanks to his attention on fostering good relationships. I met Emily, 34F, at a hackathon in my junior year. She assisted in planning the event while pursuing her studies in business administration. Despite my lack of sleep, energy drink addiction, and likely messy appearance, she somehow found my love of code charming. From the first time he laid eyes on her, Dad fell in love. He told me, "She grounds you." Following their first meal together. "Don't let this one get away." After college, Dad even assisted Emily in launching her own marketing firm. He introduced her to his network of local company owners, showed her how he drafted his contracts, and shared his business objectives with her. He would tell us, "Success isn't just about what you know. It's about helping others succeed too." Dad was always imparting his expertise and educating. Those formative years were unique. Emily and I would always make the drive to my parents' house on Sundays to have dinner. We would all sit on the back deck that Dad had constructed and chat about everything and nothing while he lit the grill. Even though he couldn't understand the majority of the technical details of my most recent work, he would still ask in-depth inquiries. Mom used to say, "There they go again with the computer talk," with a loving eye roll. Dad's pride and joy was the house itself. He purchased it with the proceeds from his first significant construction job in the 1990s, which was a historic restoration project that made his business famous. In one of Seattle's older neighborhoods, this lovely craftsman-style home features a wraparound porch and a garage that he transformed into the most well-organized workshop you've ever seen. Labeled and placed with almost fanatical precision, each tool has its place. Dad handled the house as though it were a living example of his skill. Every renovation was meticulously organized and recorded. Every repair, improvement and paint job was documented in a thorough spreadsheet that he maintained. "A house is like a living thing," he would say as he demonstrated for me how to clean the gutters or inspect the foundation. He maintained a maintenance regimen that included everything from checking the roof after winter storms to changing air filters. Neglect the little things, and they become big problems. In addition to being his haven, the workshop served as a classroom where he taught me about subjects other than tools. In addition to adding unique storage options and a workbench he made especially for teaching me woodworking, he had completely renovated the garage himself. He would say, "Every piece of wood has its own story," as we were working. The pegboard wall with delineated shapes for each tool wasn't just about organization. It was his method of teaching me that everything has a place and a purpose. Our job is to help tell that story. Our family held weekends in high regard. In that garage, Dad and I would work on his 1967 Mustang for hours on end. When I was 12, Dad had purchased it for restoration, claiming it would be a project that would strengthen our bond as father and son. That vehicle turned into a life lessons classroom. His advice, which I still abide by now, was straightforward. Always use the right tool for the job. Or shortcuts look tempting, but they'll cost you in the long run. Although Dad might have completed the Mustang project in 1 year if he had so desired, it took 3 years. However, he was more interested in the process than the final destination. I learned everything from project management to fundamental mechanics from him. We took pictures of every component we changed, recorded each step and maintained thorough logs of our development. "This isn't just about fixing a car," he would affirm. "It's about learning how to break down big problems into manageable pieces." I found that lesson to be really helpful in my profession as a software developer. Emily and I purchased a small home around 20 minutes from my parents' house after we were married. Although Dad insisted that we take out the mortgage in our names, Dad assisted us with the down payment. "You need to build your own credit history," he clarified. "It's about standing on your own feet." He taught me how to install ceiling fans and fix drywall as he worked on our renovations on the weekends. He was preparing me for the responsibilities of home ownership even back then. At this time, my career was really taking off. I'd just received a promotion to team lead, overseeing a team that was creating cloud infrastructure solutions. I enjoyed every second of it. Even if the hours were long and the strain was great. During my lunch breaks, Dad would frequently call to check in, without discussing anything specific. He was aware of the demands of managing a group and overseeing the work of others. "Remember to delegate," he would say. "You can't do everything yourself, just like I can't build a house alone." When Dad initially stated feeling exhausted all the time, we were discussing the possibility of starting a family. He continued to put off seeing a doctor, despite Mom's insistence. "Just working too hard," he would dismiss our worries. He was working on his largest project to date, a multi-million-dollar development deal that would have established his business for the ensuing 10 years. In retrospect, I regret not pressing harder and insisting on those examinations sooner. Perhaps things might have turned out differently. At the time, the business was expanding quickly. Dad was discussing growing into historical restoration projects in the Pacific Northwest and had recently launched a second office in Portland. He has established a reputation for updating the infrastructure of historic structures without sacrificing their character. He would tell his clients, It's about embracing the future while respecting the past. Everything he accomplished, including his personal and professional life, was impacted by his love of preservation. The Mustang was the subject of our last meaningful discussion. He was discussing taking it to car shows now that we had completed the restoration. When he remarked, "We should sign up for the Pacific Northwest Classic," his eyes glowed like a child's. He continued to plan for the future until the very end, saying, "Show these youngsters what a real muscle car looks like." It began like any other morning until everything changed. When Mom called, my phone buzzed while I was in an early meeting. We were in the midst of an important project conversation, so I nearly didn't respond. But I had to go out and take it for some reason. Mom was crying so hard she was having trouble speaking. Dad had passed out on a construction site. He had left by the time I arrived at the hospital. According to the physicians, it was a sudden and severe heart attack. He was only 58. The weeks following Dad's passing were a haze of mourning and bureaucracy. The funeral was crowded. Dad's business and community involvement had impacted countless people. Suppliers, contractors, and even rival businesses came to show their support. Everybody shared a story about how Dad had supported them, given them advice, or simply been there for them when they needed someone to confide in. One old craftsman told me how, despite being unable to work during a protracted illness, Dad had managed to keep him on the payroll. "Your father understood that business was about people first," he stated. The workers of the company were heartbroken. Many of them had known Dad for decades, and they told me things I had never heard before, like how he had paid for the college textbooks of one foreman's daughter, assisted another through a divorce, or remained late to teach apprentices the nuances of historical restoration. With pictures and handwritten remarks from both clients and employees, the workplace conference room was transformed into an unofficial monument. We were all surprised by how well Dad had prepared for everything. His attorney, Mr. Anderson, summoned us in for a meeting a week following the funeral. He took out this enormous accordion file that read Family Security Protocol and was neatly handwritten by Dad. Dozens of carefully arranged papers with comprehensive instructions for various areas of his land were found within. I was given a 3-day tour of Dad's estate paperwork by Mr. Anderson. Each color-coded container had personal notes outlining his decisions in addition to legal paperwork. "I've never seen an estate plan this thoroughly in my 35 years of practice," Mr. Anderson remarked. Dad had even included a 5-year business transition plan with backup plans for various circumstances. After that, Mom began going to her church's bereavement support group. She first met Steve, 58M, there. Initially, she only mentioned him in passing. Steve suggested this great book about healing. Or, Steve said it's normal to feel this way. He was one of the group facilitators and had lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier. Even if it seemed a little early, I was happy that she was receiving support. I was reminded by Emily that everyone experiences grief in a unique way. Every Tuesday night, the church grief support group met. Before long, Mom was attending church functions with Steve more often. After services, coffee gatherings became lunch meetings, which in turn became dinner dates. Our family friends began to worry about how quickly their friendship was developing. At a family get-together, my Aunt Jane pulled me aside because she was concerned that Mom was hurrying into things to make up for Dad's absence. Mom's changes became more apparent. Her haircut changed, she started dressing differently, and she even threw out the garden that Dad had helped her create. Every time I questioned these changes, she would respond, "It's time for a fresh start." Dad was hardly ever mentioned by the woman who used to spend hours narrating her life with him. It went more quickly than any of us had anticipated. Mom announced that Steve was moving in 6 months after Dad's death. James, 30M, and Lisa, 32F, his own grown children, felt it would be beneficial to bring life back into the house. I made an effort to be sympathetic, but it seemed like she was in a rush to replace everything Dad had constructed. "I'm at a crossroads right now. How can I preserve Dad's legacy without jeopardizing Mom's chances for happiness?" Emily advises me to strike a balance, but I can't help but think of Dad's letter. "Son, preserve those memories. First update. I apologize for the wait for the update and appreciate all of the advice you gave on my previous article. 3 months have passed since my last post, and things have become much worse. Steve's domineering demeanor used to bother me, but now he acts as though he owns the house my dad left me. Steve made the decision to begin a significant restoration project last month without even asking my permission. The built-in bookshelves my dad had made for the living room were being torn up by contractors when I visited one weekend. As if he owned the building, Steve was watching over them and directing them to just throw all this old wood in the dumpster. These were the final project Dad and I worked on together before he became ill, so they were more than just shelves. He responded angrily when I approached him. He said, "Look son, with a condescending emphasis on the pronoun. This house needs to be brought into the 21st century. Your father's taste was, well, dated. We're doing you a favor by increasing the property value. I reminded him that any modifications required my consent legally. Mom obviously agreed with him, but he simply chuckled and added, "Your mother and I live here. We don't need permission to improve our home." Steve knows about these things, she acknowledged. He's just trying to help. The woman who formerly loved those bookshelves and used to place her collection of antique teacups on them for Christmas now acts as though they were just taking up room. I showed her Dad's thorough house maintenance plans, but she disregarded them as dwelling in the past. Additionally, the relationship with Steve's children has deteriorated. James has taken over Dad's workshop and transformed it into a CrossFit facility. While I was on a business trip, he held a garage sale and sold the majority of Dad's tools. By repainting rooms and installing modern vinyl planks in place of Dad's meticulously refinished hardwood floors, Lisa is treating the space as though it were her own personal design project. One evening after dinner, Steve grabbed me aside and said, "Since we're paying to live here, we should have our names on the deed. It's only fair." I had to explain him that they don't pay a mortgage because Dad's planning has paid for the house in full. They don't even cover their rent. All maintenance expenses, insurance, and property taxes are paid for by me. Emily recommended that we stop making weekly visits. Now that Emma is here, she is correct, no one benefits from the stress in that household. However, taking a back seat has only made Steve more confident. He began sending me bills for improvements that I never approved, and he began making them more regularly. I should be more sympathetic of Mom's new life, according to Mom's sister, who called me recently. I attempted to explain Dad's intentions and my legal obligations, but she simply accused me of being trapped in the past. Steve makes her happy. "Why can't you just let them make the house their own?" she asked. I found out this week that the growth markers that recorded my height from the ages of 3 to 18 had been removed from the kitchen door frame. Every birthday, Dad would measure me and write the date next to each mark. "It's just an old door frame. We can't keep every piece of wood just because your father touched it," Mom remarked when I confronted her about it. I now spend more time sitting in Dad's old chair, the only piece of furniture I was able to keep, in my own garage. Mr. Anderson advises me to begin considering long-term fixes. Legally, the house belongs to me, but I will eventually have to make some difficult choices regarding its destiny. When does being the bad guy become more important than preserving your father's legacy? And when your whole family opposes you, how do you defend the moral high ground? Update 2. I appreciate all of your advice regarding my previous post. The situation has reached a breaking point and I've finally made a choice that will most likely alter everything. I spoke with my financial advisor about the house situation last week. We may make a sizable rental income, enough to cover Emma's future college fund, because nearby property values have risen by 40% in the last 3 years. I discovered at the discussion that I had been so preoccupied with the sentimental elements that I had failed to take into account the financial ramifications of allowing Mom and Steve to live rent-free. Everything went haywire when I brought this up to Mom in our weekly conversation. She yelled into the phone, "You can't do this to us. This is where we call home. Steve has worked really hard on it." She refused to listen when I tried to explain that I was only considering my choices. She continued to talk about all the enhancements they had made, utterly disregarding the fact that I had never given my approval for these changes. An hour later, Steve called. He was upset, and his tone was different from his usual arrogant demeanor. "Listen here," he announced. "In this house, we have established a life. Because you're missing your father, you can't just walk in and ruin everything." He interrupted me when I attempted to explain the financial issues, stating that they now had sweat equity in the property. I reminded him that the house belonged to me legally. "There's a reason why Dad left it to me." "Your father isn't here anymore," he replied. "You must consider the living." I talked to Emily about it and talked to Mr. Anderson about it before deciding on it the following day. When I arrived at the house, Mom and Steve were working on yet another remodeling job. In the dining room, they had begun ripping out the original crown molding, which Dad had specifically milled to blend in with the house's antique style. That image made me more determined. "They have 2 weeks to find another place to live," I told them. Mom burst into tears at once, accusing me of being callous and harsh. Steve tried to scare me by arguing with me about my inability to throw them out on the street. He began enumerating all of their local ties, including his place of employment, their church, and their neighborhood pals. When faced with challenging circumstances, I maintained my composure and firmness, as my father had taught me. I declared, "This is my property. Dad left it to me for a reason, and I'm exercising my legal right as the owner. Steve's cheeks flushed, and he began to enumerate all the money they had spent on upgrades. I informed him that the historical value of the property had actually been diminished by these unapproved alterations. When Lisa returned home and joined the debate, things became worse. Mom utilized her pregnancy as emotional leverage right away. "How are you able to treat your stepsister in this way? She will give birth to a child." Although Lisa's pregnancy is significant to them, I had to tell them that it does not affect my property rights and that she is not my stepsister. There has been an ongoing assault of emotional manipulation ever since. Mom's whole family has banded together to oppose me. Her sister called, sobbing, and said their parents wanted to make sure Mom was safe. Messages regarding the challenging rental market were left by Steve's brother, a local real estate agent. Long messages on Christian ideals and family loyalty are even coming from distant cousins who I hardly know. Dealing with family friends who have known me since my early years is the most difficult. People who grew up with me now tell me how unhappy they are with my decisions, and every call seems like another tiny betrayal. Some even claim that I'm damaging Dad's standing in the neighborhood. The problem is that this has nothing to do with cruelty or profit. This is about honoring Dad's desires and preserving the things he created. It has been agonizing enough to see them methodically destroy all traces of him. The house was his legacy. I've paid for all of their expenses, allowed them to live rent-free for years, and put up with their unapproved changes. Eventually, enough is enough. They have 2 weeks to come up with new plans. I'm refusing to give in to Mom's constant demands for more time. Mr. Anderson claims that the law is entirely on my side and that I have been more than giving. He is assisting me with creating official paperwork for the notice to vacate, ensuring that everything is accurately documented. I realize that this makes me appear to be the villain in everyone else's tale, but sometimes standing up for what's right requires making difficult choices, even when others disagree. I learned that from my dad. Third update. We appreciate everyone's help at this trying time. Things have come to an unavoidable end, therefore this will likely be my last update. I assigned Mom and Steve a 2-week deadline, but it's already passed. The past 2 weeks have been the longest of my life. They have been filled with guilt-tripping, continual emotional manipulation, and progressively frantic attempts to get me to change my mind. Mom did everything she could. Every day she called, oscillating between fury and tears. She would say, "I changed your diapers," one day. "I gave up everything for you," she would yell the next day. Steve also changed strategies, trying to negotiate instead of using intimidation. He recommended establishing a formal lease and offered to begin paying rent. I couldn't rely on them to uphold whatever agreements we made though, given what they had done to Dad's house. When I got to the house, there were people gathering on the front lawn 3 days prior to the deadline. Mom had enlisted the help of friends from church, family, and even some of Dad's former business partners. They had prepared statements about moral commitments and family responsibilities as part of what amounted to an intervention. I listened to people criticize me for being a bad son for 2 hours. The topic of honoring your parents was discussed by Mom's pastor. Dad's old secretary remembered his generosity with tears in her eyes. My elementary school teacher even came to remind me of the morals my father had attempted to teach me. The hardest part was when Lisa got up and talked about how stress could hurt her unborn child while covering her pregnant abdomen with her hands. While Mom was crying next to her, a few of the church women were glaring at me. It was an expert lesson in manipulating emotions. But during this ambush, an unexpected event occurred. I had a strange sense of serenity as I sat there listening to everyone talk about Dad. People who hadn't even been to his funeral suddenly professing to know what he would have wanted. Dad used to say, "Stand your ground when you know you're right." And I could almost hear his voice in my thoughts. I got to my feet and spoke to the group. I described how Dad planned everything carefully to ensure his family's future and how he had constructed this house by hand. I showed them pictures of Steve's unapproved modifications, including the historical elements he ruined and the fine craftsmanship he removed and replaced with flimsy modern fixtures. After that, I presented them with a letter from Dad outlining his reasons for leaving everything to me. Some of the elder business associates nodded as I read his remarks about trust, accountability, and preserving his legacy. They understood because they'd known Dad, really knew him. Shortly thereafter, the group scattered. While some looked disapproving, the righteous wrath had subsided, and others gently apologized as they walked away. Without saying another word, Mom and Steve returned inside. I showed there with Mr. Anderson and a locksmith on the morning of the deadline. Although they weren't required, I had hired a security company to be on hand just in case. The house was deserted. The remainder of their possessions were packed into Steve's truck. Steve couldn't help but give me a last poke, but Mom refused to look at me. As he assisted Lisa into his pickup, he asked, "You're happy with yourself?" Your father would be so proud of how you've treated your mother." I didn't answer. Dad would have known. I know he had prepared for this possibility. What other reason might he have had for being so explicit in his will? I strolled about the home after they had left. I had underestimated the extent of the harm. Builder-grade materials had been used to replace the original fittings. Dad had painted over or taken out his handcrafted woodwork. We had spent so many weekends at the workshop, and it had changed completely. I have no intention of pursuing damages, but Mr. Anderson documented everything for any legal considerations. I simply want to put this chapter behind me and concentrate on fixing what can be fixed. Some of Dad's old craftsman friends have already been contacted, and they are eager to assist in rebuilding the features that were taken out. For now, Mom is staying with her sister. The majority of my relatives have stopped talking to me altogether, however some sometimes call to chastise me. On social media, Steve's children continue to share heartbreaking updates about their poor mother being thrown out of her home, but fewer people are responding to each post. Through it all, Emily has been my pillar of support. She reminds me of Dad's letter whenever I begin to doubt myself, expressing his faith in my ability to make the right choices. I will eventually tell Emma about her grandfather and the heritage he attempted to preserve, but she is too little to comprehend what is occurring right now. To restore the house to its original state, I'm collaborating with a restoration professional. We can preserve the spirit of what Dad made, but it won't be perfect. Some things can't be reversed. First, the workshop will be restored. The same place where I learned from my father is where I want my daughter to study. Being the villain in someone else's tale is sometimes the price of doing the right thing. I may never be able to rebuild the relationships I lost, but I can live with the fact that I preserved what my father trusted me with. As Dad used to say, integrity is about doing the right thing, even when it hurts, and not about taking the easy route. I believe he would comprehend. My last update will be this one. I appreciate everyone's support along this journey. My family favored my sister and ignored me at her wedding, but at mine, she reconciled by gifting me our grandmother's heirloom bracelet. As a 42-year-old who has struggled with complicated family matters for as long as I can remember, I believe the time has come to tell my tale. To put it mildly, my relationship with my 38-year-old younger sister has never been easy. I've always felt like I was playing second fiddle in my own family, and it's obvious that our parents have always preferred her above me. Almost every element of my life, including my relationships, professional decisions, and even sense of self-worth, has been influenced by this emotion. My sister was the center of my parents' attention from an early age. I was more introverted and, to be honest, lonely, but she was always the gregarious, popular one. I very well recall the celebration for my 10th birthday. Only a few of the students who were invited by my parents came up. My sister, who was only 6 at the time, managed to steal the show and keep everyone entertained with her antics. When I stealthily went away to my room, holding back tears, my parents hardly noticed because they were so preoccupied with her. I was merely there at school, while my sister was the life of the party. "Why can't you be more outgoing like your sister?" is something I've heard more times than I can count. "And your sister is so lively, why aren't you?" These comparisons never stopped, gradually eroding my sense of self-worth. I began to think that there must be a problem with me, that just because I wasn't like my sister, I wasn't good enough. The preference only became more obvious as we got older. I made a valiant attempt to forge my own professional path, but my parents never seemed to appreciate it. It has always been, "You should network more like your sister." Or, "If you were as charming as your sister, you'd get promoted faster." Every achievement I made was compared to my sister's, and they always thought I fell short. I gave my best to my work in the hopes that my parents would eventually recognize my value if I could just achieve enough success. As I advanced in my job, I gave up my personal life to work late into the night and on the weekends. I recall working 80-hour weeks for months on end on one particularly taxing job. I was thrilled to contact my parents to tell them that I had finally gotten a significant client for my business. How did they react? "Oh, sweetheart, that's lovely. Have we informed you of your sister's recent employment? It will be 6 digits for her." That was always the case. It was never enough for them, no matter how high I climbed. In contrast, my sister managed to get by on her charm and the steadfast backing of our parents. Please understand that I adore my sister. She is not a nasty person, and I am aware that our parents' different treatment of us is not her fault. However, it might be difficult to avoid feeling bitter at times, particularly when she appears unaware of the privileged treatment she receives. My sister got married last month. It would be an understatement to say that our parents were ecstatic. They dedicated a large portion of their cash as well as their hearts and souls to organizing the wedding. I thought it may be an opportunity for us to strengthen our family ties, so I offered to assist with the preparations, but I was graciously turned down at every stage. "Oh, you're so busy with work, we wouldn't want to bother you," they'd reply. In actuality though, they didn't want me to get involved. I made an effort to be upbeat, telling myself that it wasn't about me and that it was my sister's big day. However, I began to feel increasingly alienated from my own family as the wedding day drew near. When I learned that my parents had asked my sister's best friend to be her maid of honor without even taking me into consideration, it was the last straw. My mother simply remarked, "Well, you're not really the maid of honor type, are you?" When I challenged them about it. "We believed that a lower function would better suit you." The actual wedding day was challenging. My sister was praised throughout our parents' remarks, which included stories about her early years and their pride in the lady she had grown into. Not a word about me was said. They acted as though I didn't exist and that the three of them made up their entire family. On the inside, I felt like I was crumbling, but I sat there trying to smile. I heard my mother speaking to one of her friends after the ceremony. "We're so relieved," she remarked. "We were worried we might never get to experience a wedding day like this." It was obvious that they didn't believe I would ever get married. The worst was still to come, but it felt like a kick to the belly. My mother drew me aside later that night. I briefly entertained the idea that she may express regret for not including me in the remarks. Rather, she said something that will always stick in my memory. "Don't stress about your wedding. Since this might be the only one we get to plan, we put our all into it." We wanted to ensure that we did it correctly. Something broke inside of me at that very instant. All of the years I had spent feeling inferior and attempting to get their acceptance came tumbling down. However, it also seemed as though a fog had dissipated. I realized for the first time just how poisonous our family dynamic had become. The problem is that I'm not some lonesome spinster that they should be concerned about. 39M, my amazing fiancé, believes in me and loves me for who I am, not what he believes I should be. He has supported me through all of this family dysfunction over our 2 years of dating. It was him who persuaded me to go to therapy and begin addressing my problems with self-esteem. 3 years ago, I met my fiancé during a seminar at work. I was reluctant to let him in at first. I'd been scared of partnerships for years because I felt unworthy. However, he was gentle and patient, gradually dismantling the barriers I had put up around myself. I can still clearly recall the instant I knew I was falling for him. As we spent a peaceful evening together, I told him about a challenging workday. He simply listened without trying to solve problems or make things better. Then he said, "You realize how wonderful you are? You are amazing in the way you approach problems and the way you take pride in your job." I felt genuinely noticed and valued for who I am for the first time in my life. All of this familial drama has been greatly supported by my fiancé. He has comforted me when I've sobbed following tough phone conversations with my parents. He has urged me to put my own mental health first and to establish limits. Furthermore, he has never made me feel inadequate or likened me to my sister. Since college, 41F, my incredible best friend, has been by my side. When I'm feeling overwhelmed by self-doubt, she's always there to remind me of my strengths. She repeatedly reassured me that I deserved more while holding me while I sobbed after the wedding. In my life, our connection has consistently provided encouragement and affirmation. She has witnessed my darkest moments and has never passed judgment on my difficulties with my family. Rather, she has consistently provided me with a sympathetic ear, a shoulder to weep on, and occasionally a harsh reality check when I begin to internalize my parents' criticism. Building a life away from the influence of my family has also been greatly aided by my best buddy. She is the one who inspired me to follow interests and pastimes that I find enjoyable, even if they don't align with my parents' preferences. Because of her, I've developed a love for painting, which I never would have attempted if my only goal had been to please my parents. For me, these painting sessions have turned into a kind of therapy where I can release feelings that I've suppressed for years. I'm currently working to take back my life and my self-esteem. I'm attempting to strengthen my sense of self while in treatment and healing from years of emotional neglect. It's not simple. On some days I can still hear my parents' judgmental voices telling me that I'm not good enough. However, I'm learning to confront those ideas and remind myself of my own value and potential. My fiancé and I are discussing our own wedding plans, which will be small and personal and accurately represent who we are as a pair. It's thrilling, but it also evokes a wide range of complex feelings. To show my parents that I'm deserving of a celebration, I secretly hope to have the lavish wedding my sister had. However, I'm making an effort to remind myself that this day should be about me and my fiancé, not about giving my family proof of anything. I'm also trying to figure out why my sister and I are treated so differently by our parents in therapy. According to my therapist, My parents' actions may be a result of their own fears and unmet expectations. With her gregarious demeanor and social success, my sister might be the embodiment of everything they've always wanted to be. They might be reminded of their own perceived shortcomings by my more reserved demeanor and emphasis on professional achievement. This lets me see them as flawed people rather than as all-powerful people whose approval I must gain, even while it doesn't justify their actions. However, I'm having trouble deciding how to proceed with my family. I want to completely cut them off in order to shield myself from more harm. I also harbor the hope that we might be able to mend our friendship. However, I'm not really sure where to begin. I've considered going up to them and telling them how they've harmed me over the years, but I'm scared they'll just brush it off as they always do. Even worse, they'll reverse it and blame me for my sister's success, saying that I'm the issue because I'm too sensitive or envious. According to my fiancé, I ought to offer them one final opportunity to get together and discuss our relationship openly. He thinks there's a chance they would realize and desire to change if I can articulate how their actions have affected me. He has volunteered to support me by being present if I choose to have this chat. However, my best friend believes that I should put my own recovery first and avoid them, at least for the time being. She fears that attempting to mend the relationship before I've resolved my personal problems completely could hinder my advancement. Instead, she said, I might want to write them a letter to describe how I feel without having to respond right away. I'm conflicted. They are my family, on the one hand. A part of me still yearns for their affection and acceptance in spite of everything. There are both pleasant and painful memories in me, such as my mom consoling me after my first heartbreak and my dad teaching me how to ride a bike. I question whether it's worth struggling for those moments of connection. However, I'm worn out after years of trying to live up to their expectations only to be ignored and underappreciated all the time. I'm concerned that if I keep talking to them, I might not be able to get well and go on with my life. Additionally, I fear that my future children will experience the same suffering and insecurity that I have. As I type this, I'm aware that I've never really put all of these emotions into words before. It is both overpowering and somewhat freeing. I've devoted a significant portion of my life to attempting to fulfill the expectations of my parents. I'm now at last beginning to understand who I am and what I desire. I'm looking to you, Reddit, for guidance. How would you respond if I were you? How can I handle this complicated familial situation? Should I concentrate on starting a new family with my fiancé and friends who genuinely care about me, or is there any chance that we may mend our relationship? If any of you have experienced comparable circumstances, how did you respond? Was it best for you to keep your distance from your family, or were you able to mend your relationship with them? How did you handle the guilt and the pressure from society to keep family ties intact if you did remove yourself? I appreciate you reading this far. I realize it was lengthy. Finally sharing something with someone, even if they are only complete strangers you met online, feels nice. I would be very grateful for any guidance or words of encouragement. I feel like I'm at a fork in the road and don't know which way to go. However, I am aware that I cannot stay in this state of uncertainty and keep looking for unfulfilled acceptance. A change is needed, but I'm not clear what that modification should entail. First update. 2 months have passed since my last post, and I wanted to give you all an update on what has been going on. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who read my tale and gave me advice. Your assistance has been priceless. The most significant shift has been in how I view myself. I've been going to therapy regularly, and my self-esteem is really improving. I'm working through years of emotional maltreatment and continual comparison to my sister with the support of my therapist. Although it's challenging, I'm coming to value myself regardless of my family's opinion. It has been beneficial to keep a wins journal. I jot down one accomplishment, no matter how minor, every day. I'm gradually coming to terms with the fact that, despite what my family may believe, I am competent and deserving. I've also shared my difficulties with my coworkers. Unexpectedly, a lot of others had comparable experiences, which made me feel less alone and opened up some fantastic mentorship opportunities. My relationship with my fiancé has undergone the biggest shift. Our relationship has strengthened as we prepare for our wedding. Throughout it all, he has been my pillar of support, always ready to listen and offer uncritical support. We've discussed our future in great detail, including how we want to handle family dynamics with our own prospective children. Speaking up about my anxieties of repeating the habits I was raised with has been both frightening and freeing. In addition to being understanding, my fiancé has pledged to constantly work with me to establish a kind, encouraging household. While talking about wedding arrangements last week, an unforgettable moment occurred. To show my family that I'm deserving of a celebration, I acknowledge that a part of me wants a lavish wedding like my sister's. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, My fiancé replied. I want our wedding to be about us, not your parents or anybody else, because you deserve to be celebrated every day. His remarks served as a warning. I came to the realization that I was still unconsciously trying to win my parents' approval. We have now made the decision to organize a wedding that accurately captures who we are as a couple. We have made some firm decisions. We intend to have a small, private ceremony with only our closest friends and family, perhaps at sunset on the beach or in a garden. We wish to honor our love and dedication in a cozy, happy setting. We're thinking of combining our love of the outdoors with the romance of beginning a married life by going trekking in a national park for our honeymoon. But I'm not sure if I should invite my sister and parents to the wedding. Reconciliation is something I wish for, but I'm afraid they'll ruin our day or say something cruel. My fiancé has been encouraging and has promised to support my decision no matter what. In order to establish clear guidelines for acceptable behavior, he has even offered to speak with my family if we invite them. My maid of honor, who is also my best friend, has been a huge help. She has immersed herself into the wedding planning process, and her excitement for this new phase of my life has been a lovely diversion from my complex familial feelings. She has been gently encouraging me to think about my own desires, apart from any obligations to my family. I am reminded by her that today is your day. You deserve to be in the company of people who truly appreciate you. 2 months later, I'm in a lot better place. I'm beginning to see my own power and have more faith in myself. I'm learning that family is about people who support you without conditions, not simply genetic ties. And I'm creating a future with a partner who genuinely cherishes me. However, I continue to struggle with how to deal with my biological family. Should I risk drama by inviting them to the wedding? Should I speak with them again before making a decision? Or ought I to concentrate on this new phase of my life? Reddit, I'd love to know what you think. How have you responded to comparable circumstances involving weddings and family? I would appreciate any guidance on establishing limits or having challenging conversations. Once again, I appreciate your help. Having this place to reflect and share is really meaningful. I'll keep you informed as events develop. Second update. Since my last update, which was a month ago, a lot has transpired. I appreciate all of your suggestions and encouragement regarding my previous post. We decided to invite my sister and dad after considerable discussion with my therapist and fiancé. We took our time creating the ideal invitation, attempting to mix being warm with setting up appropriate boundaries. I didn't get the response I was hoping for. My mother called me 3 days after I sent out the invites. She initially appeared thrilled, but then the inquiries began. Why is the wedding so small? Do you not wish to have a formal celebration as your sister did? She laughed when I told her that we wanted a small ceremony that was true to who we were. You've always been really challenging. For once, can't you simply act normally? I made an effort to maintain my composure by applying the strategies I've been learning in therapy. I clarified that since it was our day, we intended to celebrate it any way we saw fit. My father picked up the phone at that point. I have been speaking with your mother, he stated forcefully. We believe that this little wedding is a mistake on your part. Family members find it embarrassing. What are people going to think? I was taken aback. They continued to care more about looks than about how happy I was. I remained calm and informed them that although I valued their opinions, the choice was definitive. My father was upset and my mother was crying as the call ended. My fiancé was there to encourage me even though I was shaken by the call. Reminding me that their response was about them and not about us, he held me while I sobbed. My sister sent me an unexpectedly encouraging text the following day. I called her, bewildered. At first our chat was difficult, but she opened up as we spoke. She remarked, I've been considering our relationship a lot. I had no idea how much you were going through. You know, I've always envied you. I was surprised. Did you envy me? But the favorite was always you. She gave a sorrowful laugh. I always felt like I was living in your shadow, maybe to our parents. You were really intelligent and motivated. I believed that in order to receive any attention at all, I needed to be the life of the party. For the first time in years, we actually spoke for hours on end. I apologized for the resentment I had held, and she apologized for the instances in which she had been disrespectful. It seemed like a beginning, but it wasn't a miracle solution. But a new problem has emerged as a result of our increased knowledge. My sister wants to contribute to the wedding and play a significant role in it. I'm excited about the prospect of repairing our connection, but I'm also cautious. Could it be that this is merely preparing me for further disappointment? Although he believes it's a good step, my fiancé is letting me make the final decision. My best buddy, who reminds me of all the hurt I've endured in the past, is more wary. She remarked, it's acceptable to have hope, But remember to take precautions as well. I'm conflicted. Though I'm afraid of exposing myself to additional suffering, this could be the start of a new, healthy relationship with my sister. Then there is our parents' problem. If my sister is involved but they are kept at a distance, how would they respond? Regarding the actual wedding, we are proceeding with our preparations. We've located a stunning garden location that embodies the private, romantic ambiance we're aiming for. We've decided on a color palette, selected flowers, and begun researching catering choices. I'm getting enthusiastic about these details despite the familial drama. Regardless of who shows up, it serves as a reminder that this day is about celebrating our love. Throughout everything, my fiancé has been my pillar of support. He's given me space when I've needed to think things through alone, been understanding when I've needed to rant, and given me advice when I've asked for it. I'm even more convinced that marrying him is the perfect choice because of his consistent support. I'm focusing on establishing and upholding limits in my treatment. In order to prepare me for any challenging situations that may come up, my therapist has been helping me rehearse reactions to possible events at the wedding. Having to prepare for a confrontation on what should be one of the best days of my life makes me feel empowered, but it also makes me a little melancholy. I'm at another fork in the road, Reddit. Should I accept my sister's offer to assist with the wedding, which could lead to a reconciliation but also increase the likelihood of further harm? How do I strike a balance between the need to protect myself and my desire for family harmony? Furthermore, how can I deal with my parents' criticism without allowing it to ruin our special day? Any guidance or first-hand knowledge would be very valued. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support. You have no idea how much it means. Third update. A week has passed since our wedding, and I wanted to give everyone who has helped me along the way this last update. Everything's all occurred so quickly, and I'm still absorbing everything. I gave my sister's offer to assist with the wedding a lot of thought before accepting. Although it was a risk, I thought it was worthwhile. There was a lot going on in the days before the wedding. I was astonished at how well my sister and I worked together on the last-minute details. Although there were tense moments, we were able to resolve them and have open communication. The actual wedding day was tense. My parents were seated in the front row as I started down the aisle. My father actually grinned at me while my mother wiped at her eyes. It was something, even though it wasn't the kind of proud, warm smile I had always wanted. The ceremony was kind, intimate, and all we could have imagined. I felt as though everything else vanished as my fiancé and I exchanged vows. We were the only ones making pledges to one another at that very moment. My sister came up to me with a tiny wrapped surprise during the reception. An exquisite silver bracelet that had belonged to our grandmother was found within. She gave me the bracelet, which had been a source of conflict between us for years, as a gesture of goodwill. My father later asked me to dance, which surprised me. He remarked, "Your mother and I, we may not have always understood you, but seeing you today, you seem happy." As we moved uncomfortably to the music. Incredibly joyful. It felt like an acknowledgement, but it wasn't an apology. The remainder of the evening was a haze of joy, dancing and laughter. Although there were tense times, it was a happy occasion all around. Throughout it all, my new spouse was by my side, cheering me on in the good times and encouraging me in the bad. My sister took me aside one final time as we were heading out on our honeymoon. "I want you to know that even though our relationship hasn't always been easy, I'm proud of you," she said. Additionally, I hope that we can continue to improve our friendship. Since the wedding, the days have been a combination of peaceful introspection and honeymoon delight. Disengaged from the outside world and concentrating on one another, my spouse and I hiked in a national park for a fantastic week. I'm trying to take in all that happened now that we're home. Since I got back, I've been seeing my therapist, and we've been discussing how I feel about the wedding and how it will affect my future relationships with my family. She has reminded me that it's acceptable to still feel conflicted while also encouraging me to recognize the constructive actions that were performed. My spouse and I have discussed limits and the type of connection we hope to have with my family in the future. We acknowledge that maintaining open communication is important, but we also recognize that our small family must come first. Since the wedding, my sister and I have texted each other a few times. They have been friendly yet hesitant. Next week, we're going to get together for coffee to discuss this further. Although there is still some tension with my parents, there seems to be a change. When my mother called to inquire about the honeymoon, the conversation was a little stilted, but it lacked the criticism I've grown accustomed to. I'm struck by how much has changed as I think back on the entire experience, from my first post to this point. I'm not gullible enough to believe that our family's problems are all behind us. I'm aware that much work remains to be done, but I feel hopeful for the first time in a long time. This process has taught me a lot about who I am. Even when people don't value me, I've learned to set boundaries, stand up for what I want and value myself. I've discovered that while it's acceptable to wish for improved ties with my family, their acceptance does not determine my value. Above all, I've discovered that family isn't just about blood, it's also about the people who encourage you, share in your happiness, and support you through your hardships. Through this, my best friend, my spouse, and even some of you on Reddit have been like family to me. I want to let anyone who is dealing with comparable family problems know that things do get better. It may not be flawless. It may not be what you had anticipated. However, there is still hope. Don't be scared to set boundaries. Surround yourself with people that genuinely care about you and keep improving yourself. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support along this trip. I have greatly benefited from your counsel, support, and shared experiences. Without you, I couldn't have survived this. Cheers to fresh starts, recovery, and building the kind of love and support that each of us deserves. I was always the forgotten one in my family, but now they want me back. My next decision will change everything in my life. In my family, I, 42, have always been the unnoticed child. I'm not sure how to respond to my parents' sudden desire for me to return to their lives. There is a big age difference between myself and my 5 siblings, of which I am the youngest. As a child, I frequently had the impression that my house was a parallel universe. I was just there, the quiet one, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who was easy to forget, while my siblings were in and out of hospitals and therapy sessions all the time. One of my first memories is of returning home from school to find the house deserted. Nobody checked my schoolwork or inquired about my day. Everyone was too preoccupied with my siblings' problems to realize that I also needed to eat, so I learned to cook for myself early. I vividly remember how disappointed I was when my parents failed to remember my birthday for 3 consecutive years. They were just overwhelmed. It wasn't that they were awful people. I suppose they felt they didn't have to worry about me because they had 4 children who were coping with different health and mental health problems. I was the normal one, the healthy one. However, it's not as easy as it seems to be the normal one in a chaotic family. Throughout his childhood and adolescence, my 52-year-old oldest brother had to spend a lot of time in the hospital due to a serious chronic condition. He still has health issues and is largely dependent on our parents for assistance. Since I can remember, my 50-year-old elder sister has been in therapy or taking medicine for her early struggles with anxiety and depression. The 48-year-old twins who are the middle siblings needed special education and ongoing care due to their learning difficulties. Then there was myself, the last person to consider. The one who was supposed to comprehend, to be self-sufficient, to simply be there. It was out of need that I learned to be independent. I was essentially rearing myself by high school. I knew that grades were my ticket out, so I earned them. Not because anyone pushed me. I joined clubs and teams for the opportunity to spend as much time away from home as possible, not for the recognition. I remember one specific instance from my junior year of high school. It meant a lot to me that I had advanced to the debate state finals. I had put a lot of effort into it, practiced late into the night and given it my all. In the weeks before the finals, I mentioned it to my parents several times. I was set to go when I stepped downstairs on the morning of the event, wearing my finest attire. Frazzled as usual, my mom replied, "Oh, are you going somewhere?" as she hardly looked up from a stack of medical bills. I tried not to sound hurt as I reminded her about the debate finals. "It's today, I told you about it." She responded, "Oh right." But it was obvious that she couldn't truly recall. "All okay, good luck. We have to take your brother to his doctor's appointment, therefore your father and I are unable to attend." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. Naturally, and always has been, my brother's health came before my argument. I made it to the finals by myself and finished in second. Nobody inquired about my experience when I arrived home. For weeks, the certificate I was given remained on my desk, hidden from everyone else. My getaway was college. I finally felt like I could breathe after deciding on a school on the opposite side of the nation. I made friends that didn't need to be reminded of my birthday, genuinely saw me and paid attention when I talked. M and C, 2 of them, grew to be the family I never had. MC and I made the decision to remain together after graduation. We started establishing our life after relocating to a new state that was far from any of our relatives. Determining that I made a difference, I threw myself into my career and I was successful. Now that I'm 42, my life appears to be going well. I run a skilled team as a senior marketing executive at a Fortune 500 firm, and I'm renowned for my creative problem-solving and ability to perform under pressure. Ironically, I became quite good at drawing attention to myself and making things visible because I was raised invisible. Meetings, presentations, And decisions occupy my days. Even though I put in a lot of overtime, I enjoy my job because it gives me a sense of worth and purpose that I didn't have as a child. People at work pay attention to what I have to say because they see me and respect my viewpoint. I never get tired of the euphoric feeling. My life is comfortable while I'm not working. I have a small but close-knit group of friends, I travel whenever I can, and I possess a lovely condo with a view of the city skyline. My best college pals, M and C, are still my pillars of support, and I've formed other deep bonds. We host movie marathons, game evenings, and weekend brunches. I've been addressing issues of abandonment and persistent feelings of invisibility in therapy for years. Although the process has been drawn out and occasionally difficult, it has improved my understanding of who I am. I've learned to respect myself, set limits, and quit looking to those who can't give me approval. My interactions with my family have been sparse for the past 20 years, rare visits every few years, and infrequent phone calls on holidays. To shield myself from the hurt of their apathy, I kept them at arm's length rather than cutting them off entirely. Then, unexpectedly, my mother called last week. We hadn't spoken for more than a year, and our most recent contact had been a clumsy exchange of pleasantries, so I nearly didn't respond. But I had to pick it up for some reason. Without even saying hello, she continued, "We want you to come home for Thanksgiving." She sounded older and more worn out than I could recall. "You are missed by your father and me." It seemed as though someone had punched me in the stomach. "Do you miss me? When I was growing up, where was this? When none of them appeared after I graduated from college. When I built a life for myself for 20 years. I stumbled. I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it. Work is really busy right now, and I have plans with friends. Are you planning with friends?" Her voice assumed that tone of remorse that I was all too familiar with from my early years. "Your family is us. If you need to alter your plans, your pals will undoubtedly understand." Family seemed like a hollow term. After feeling like an afterthought my entire life, what did it mean? She went on to say, "Your siblings will all be here." Apparently oblivious to or choosing to disregard my reservations. To have everyone together once more would mean so much. I was filled with resentment. Is everyone back together? First of all, when had we ever been together? I couldn't recall a family meal where someone wasn't experiencing a crisis, going to therapy, or being admitted to the hospital. I finally said, "I'll think about it," to put an end to the discussion. However, I knew I wasn't going as soon as I hung up. I became physically nauseous at the idea of sitting around a table and looking like we were a happy, regular family and everything was good. 1 week later, I'm still debating the choice. I had a tiny kid-like want to leave, to think that perhaps, at last they noticed me. That perhaps they wish to make amends because they regret how they treated me. However, the mature side of me, the one that has had treatment and undergone the arduous process of recovery, is more aware of this. They haven't called because they've suddenly realized how much they've been ignoring me. My siblings are still having difficulties, they are growing older, and they have come to the realization that I'm the only one with their lives in order, which is why they are phoning. I'm their fallback option, not their daughter. I can't quit thinking about it though. What if I'm mistaken? What if this is a sincere effort to get back in touch? Am I being unforgiving or overly harsh? Or am I at last defending myself and establishing sound boundaries? I thought I had dealt with the feelings that the call had evoked. More than in years, I've been thinking back on my early years. I had a dream the other night that I was back in my former bedroom, shouting loudly, but no one could hear me. I felt like that forlorn, invisible youngster again as I woke up in a cold sweat. It also has an impact on my work. I was thinking about my family when I slept off at a crucial meeting yesterday. My team took note and continued to give me worried glances. I have a reputation for being calm and attentive, yet after just one phone call, I feel like I'm losing it. After discussing it with M and C, they both believe I shouldn't go. They have personally witnessed the harm done by my family and the years it has taken me to recover. They fear that returning home will reverse all of my gains. "There is nothing you owe them," M stated firmly. "Don't allow them to pull you back into their drama. You've created a wonderful life for yourself." C was more tactful. "Remember how long it took you to stop flinching every time the phone rang? I know it's hard," he continued. "When you first started establishing limits with them, how many panic attacks did you experience? Is all that development worth the risk?" I am certain that they are correct. However, that little voice of the young child who merely wanted her parents to notice and adore her is still inside of me. "Perhaps this time will be different," she's whispering. "They might finally be the family I've always desired this time." M and C also remind me that I have the freedom to choose, and they will be there for me no matter what. And I'm grateful for that, But it doesn't help with the decision. So here I am asking random people online for guidance. Is it improper of me to want to go? Is it selfish of me to prioritize my mental well-being over a family reunion? Or, after being ignored all my life, am I now acting in my own best interests? Even though Thanksgiving is still a few months away, I can't stop thinking about this. I'm struggling to focus at work and fall asleep. I become anxious every time my phone rings, wondering whether it's them calling again. A part of me wants to stop communicating with them, block their numbers, and carry on with my life as it has been. However, another part of me feels bad about even thinking about it. Even if they weren't particularly good parents, they are still my parents. I have no idea what to do. I'm not sure how to make sense of the difference between the accomplished, self-reliant adult I've become and the lonely, invisible child I was. I'm not sure whether I can deal with my family without becoming that frightened, abandoned young child again. What should I do, Reddit? Should I risk rehashing old wounds by attending this Thanksgiving dinner? Or should I keep my distance and possibly ruin any possibility of a reconciliation? When your parents suddenly want you in their lives after decades of ignoring you, how do you handle it? I would appreciate any guidance. I could really use an outside viewpoint because I feel like I'm drowning in uncertainty. Update 1: About 2 weeks have passed since my last post, and while I would like to claim that things have become more obvious, they have really gotten more confusing. Though recent events have taken me by surprise, I appreciate all of the support and advice. It has given me a lot to think about. First, my older brother, who has long-term health problems, called me out of the blue. It was unexpected to see his name on my caller ID because we haven't spoken face-to-face in years. I briefly believed that something horrible had occurred. His voice seemed older and more worn out than I remembered when he said, "Hey sis. Have you got a moment? We need to talk about something serious." I felt shivers down my spine at his tone. He seemed to be speaking for the entire family, and it sounded menacing. He went on, "Mom and Dad have been talking," without waiting for me to answer. "As they age, they are concerned about the future and who will look after things after they are gone." A knot started to form in my stomach. I hoped I was mistaken, but I had a feeling I knew where this was going. When they can no longer care for one of the boys, they want to appoint you as their legal guardian. The boys referred to our brothers who suffered from serious illnesses. It seemed as though someone had punched me in the stomach. Protector? Me? For most of my childhood, they hardly acknowledged me as the invisible child. "What?" I choked out. "Why me? Why now?" My brother let out a deep sigh. "Look, I realize this is a lot to ask, but you are the only one who is truly stable. Everyone else has their own problems. You've succeeded. You're in control of your life. They believe you to be the ideal option." What I was hearing was unbelievable. Suddenly, after years of being neglected and treated as an afterthought, I was given this enormous duty. It was like a horrible joke and it felt unreal. Have they even considered asking me about this? With a voice trembling with rage and incredulity, I demanded. Or were they just going to spring it on me at Thanksgiving? The person on the other end of the line paused for a while. When he eventually said, they were hoping to discuss it in person. I thought you should know beforehand, give you time to think about it. Consider it. How could I possibly consider being guardian of a brother that I don't really know? A sibling who has spent decades taking care of our parents. "I can't do this," I replied, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. "I can't just take on this duty and drop everything. My life is my own. Plans of my own." My brother remarked, "I know it's a lot," in an apologetic tone. "They're desperate though. They must have confidence that someone will cover for them while they are away." I sat in startled silence for what seemed like hours after we hung up. It was all so utterly ridiculous. After years of ignoring me, they now wanted to put this huge responsibility on me without even consulting me. I thought things couldn't get any more confusing, but a few days later, I got a letter from my mother. It was lengthy, meandering, and chock full of the same guilt-tripping jargon I recalled from my early years. She continued by talking about how difficult things had been for them, how much they had given up for the family, and how much they needed me right now. Near the end was the section that truly affected me. "Sweetheart, we're not asking for much," she wrote. "All we need to know is that someone will take care of the family while we are away. Our only hope is you." Just hope. I mean, how many times did I need them? When I was growing up, feeling unwelcome and invisible, where was there hope for me? Ever since I got that letter, I've been a complete disaster. I've struggled to focus at work and sleep. My group has observed. Meetings have had to be rescheduled because I simply cannot focus. Every part of my life is being impacted by this circumstance, and I detest it. They still have this control over me, and I detest it. For an urgent wine and venting session, I invited M and C over. On my part, they were both indignant. "They can't do this to you," M exclaimed, her eyes glimmering with rage. "They cannot expect you to be their safety net after ignoring you for decades. It's unfair." C remained supportive but was more measured. He added softly, "You need to consider what's best for you. Not what they desire or what's best for them. What would you like? What am I looking for?" It's a straightforward question, but I'm having a terrible time coming up with a response. A part of me, the young child who constantly sought her parents' favor, longs to say yes and to be the decent daughter they never thought I was. However, the mature me, who has put a lot of effort into creating a life and identity apart from my family's shadow, is yelling no. I've devoted a significant portion of my life to proving my value to them, to being noticed, to being appreciated. And they want me to sacrifice everything now that I'm at last living a life where I am respected and seen. To suspend my life. To tidy up the mess they created. I become more irate the more I consider it. I'm not being asked to join the family. They want me to be their guardian and caregiver. They want a promise that their issues would be resolved when they leave, not a relationship with me. I've made up my mind after spending hours discussing it with M and C. I will not be attending Thanksgiving. I will not act as their guardian. I refuse to allow them to drag me back into the dysfunction from which I have so desperately fled. It won't be simple, I know. I'm aware that there will be emotional manipulation and guilt trips. However, I am also aware that I am worthy of better. I should be able to live the life I have created for myself without having to deal with their disregard and demands. I will give my brother a call back tomorrow to inform him of my choice. After that, I'll send a letter to my parents outlining my reasons for not attending Thanksgiving and my inability to fulfill their wishes for me to be their guardian. Even though I know it's the correct thing to do, it will be difficult. I'm afraid. I'm depressed. I'm pleased with myself for finally putting my needs first and putting my own health ahead of their expectations, even if I still want things to be different. Thank you to everyone who left a remark on my previous post. During this trying time, your words of support and encouragement have been invaluable. After a lifetime of feeling invisible, it means more than you can imagine to feel seen and understood. After speaking with my family, I'll provide another update. Good luck to me. I suspect that I will require it. Update 2. I feel like I've aged years in a matter of weeks since my last update, which was around a month ago. My family's predicament has escalated in unexpected ways, and I'm still in shock over all that has transpired. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who left a comment on my previous post. During a very trying period, your guidance and encouragement meant the world to me. I heeded your advice, and when I needed it most, it gave me the courage to defend myself. I declined the position of guardian for my siblings and chose not to attend Thanksgiving, as I said in my previous update. After calling my brother to inform him of my choice, I wrote a letter to my parents outlining my justifications. For a time at least, I believed that would be the end of it. I was mistaken. When I got home from work last week, my 70-year-old mother was waiting for me at the door. I was so shocked that I almost dropped my keys. She has never come to see me before. Not even when I bought my condo, when I got my major promotion, or when I moved into my first apartment, but here she was, standing at my door as if she had every right to be there, looking older and more worn out than I remembered. "Mom," I said, barely raising my voice above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" She took a while to respond. She simply stared at me, her gaze sweeping across my face as if she had never seen me before. Perhaps she was. When she eventually stated, "We need to talk." Her tone was forceful but gentle. "It's not good for your father. The physicians say." She trailed off, tears welling up in her eyes. I experienced a little twinge of guilt. I was unaware that my dad was ill. Then I realized that I hadn't known since they hadn't informed me. Because unless they require anything from me, they never tell me anything. I inhaled deeply, bracing myself. "I'm sorry to hear that," I added, trying to sound impartial. "But I don't see what that has to do with me." My mom's eyes became wide with surprise. "He's your dad," she cried out. "How can you say that?" "Is he?" The venom in my voice surprised me as I shot back. "When has he ever acted like a father to me?" I briefly believed my mother might try to enter when she moved forward. I remained steadfast in the doorway, preventing her from entering. I wasn't going to give her access to my personal space or the life I had created for myself. "Please," she begged, her voice adopting the guilty tone I so vividly recalled from my early years. "You are necessary. I am unable to manage things on my own because your father is constantly in and out of the hospital. Your siblings? My siblings? I interrupted her. My siblings always. Mom, what about me? At what point did you need me for myself rather than what I could provide for everyone else? She gave me the impression that I had slapped her. That's not fair, she remarked. You have always been cherished by us. We have always supported you. I was unable to resist. I chuckled. The sound reverberated along the deserted corridor, loud and terrible. Are you there for me? When? You forgot my birthdays. When? When did you miss my final debate? When did you not attend my graduation from college? Please let me know exactly when you were there for me, Mom. I briefly had a surge of gratification when my mother's face crumbled. She was at last experiencing a small portion of the suffering I had endured for years. She said, "We did the best we could." With a broken voice. You have no idea how it was to attempt to keep everyone alive and well. There was no time for, I concluded. For me, for her. I wasn't ill, so you didn't have time for me. Since I wasn't creating issues, due to the fact that I was invisible. For a long time the burden of decades of unsaid hurt hung between us as we stood there in quiet. When my mother eventually responded, "I'm sorry," I briefly thought she was telling the truth. That's not how we intended to make you feel. You are loved by us. You are necessary to us. Come home, please. Assist us. My eyes pricked with tears, but I blinked them away. My family has brought me enough tears. I can't, I stated firmly. I refuse to. Now, Mom, I have a life of my own, one I created without you. I won't sacrifice that to serve as your contingency plan. Backup plan? She asked again, raising her voice. Do you believe this to be that? We are your family. I answered, no. And even I was astonished by how definitive my voice sounded. You aren't, no longer. I decided to choose my family. My friends, who have helped me, who have stood by me, who have seen me when you had no desire to look. With a look of disbelief and hurt on her face, my mother gazed at me. She remarked, so that's it. You're just going to turn your back on us? I gave a headshake. No, Mother. It's been a while since you abandoned me. I'm simply leaving at last. She didn't answer. Rather, she turned and strode off, her shoulders hunched in surrender. I was both relieved and saddened as I watched her leave. It seemed like the end of something. Possibly the loss of hope and the hope that my parents would one day see me and show me the kind of love I needed. That should be the end of it, I thought. I believed I had stated my stance clearly. However, as usual, life had other ideas. My brother called me a week following my mother's visit. His words, my father passed away. I sat there looking at my phone, not sure if I should feel guilty, relieved or sad. The news seemed to be about a stranger rather than my own father, and I felt numb. According to my brother, the funeral is next week. Will you come? After closing my eyes and inhaling deeply, I answered, no, I don't think I will. The other end of the line was silent for a long time. My brother finally answered, I understand. And I was shocked to hear that he didn't sound judgmental. Take care of yourself, sis. I sat for a while after I hung up, reflecting about my early years, my father, and our unfulfilled connection. I recognized that I no longer needed his attention and praise after reflecting on all the times I had wanted for it. I've devoted a significant portion of my life to gaining my family's affection and attention. In actuality, though, I no longer require their approval. I am proud of the life I have created for myself. I have a career I'm enthusiastic about, friends who adore me, and a sense of self-worth independent of other people's opinions. The passing of my father feels like the end of a chapter, a depressing one, full of unmet words and lost chances. However, it's already over, and I can't alter it. I just have to keep going. I will not be attending the funeral. Neither my mother nor my siblings will be contacted. It's not because I'm angry or spiteful. I've moved on from it. It's just that I've come to the realization that I no longer belong in that environment. I've outgrown it. I want those who might criticize me for my choice to realize that it has nothing to do with forgiveness or the lack of it. It has to do with protecting oneself. It's about realizing that sometimes walking away is the healthiest course of action and that some relationships are too damaged to be repaired. I'm no longer upset. I'm not depressed. I'm just free from the burden of unmet expectations, free from the hurt of being ignored and underappreciated, and free to live my life as I see fit without the dysfunctional shadow of my family hovering over me. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has followed my story and provided encouragement and guidance. During one of the most trying times in my life, your comments have given me courage and consolation. You've given me the confidence to advocate for myself and put my needs ahead of those of others. My last update will be this one. I'm concentrating on my future from now on, one that I can control and that is unencumbered by the burdens of my past. In some ways, it's frightening, but it's also quite freeing. I want to let everyone know that it's acceptable to make your own decisions, especially if they are in a similar circumstance, are having trouble meeting expectations from family, or feel unnoticed or underappreciated. Even if the ties are with family, it's acceptable to leave them if they are hurting you. You are worthy of being appreciated, seen and loved for who you are. One final time, I want to thank you all for being the encouraging group of people I never had as a child. You can never know how much your understanding and kindness have meant. I survived an accident, but my family's betrayal hurts more. 3 years of silence, lies, and a crossroads for reconciliation. I, 35F, am in dire need of some guidance. I spent weeks in the hospital following a horrific vehicle accident 3 years ago. After a drunk truck driver crashed into my automobile, I suffered a fractured arm and had to spend a lengthy time recovering to regain my ability to walk. Even though the accident wasn't my fault, I'm still extremely cautious when driving even 3 years after it happened. The problem is that because my sister had gone into labor, my relatives did not come to my aid or offer me support during this trying time. Ironically, when the tragedy occurred, it was my route to surprise her at the hospital. I was employed at a company a couple hours away from my hometown at the time. I made the decision to surprise my sister after I received a call from my parents informing me that she was in labor and being taken to the hospital. I drove off after borrowing a friend's vehicle. I had an accident on the way there and was taken to the closest hospital. My friends and coworkers were the main people that helped me during my recuperation. At first, I could see why my parents were too busy with my sister and her infant. My parents didn't check on me though, even days after my sister gave birth. I contacted them several times while falling in and out of consciousness, frantically asking staff if my parents had visited or called, despite the pain. Each time I encountered disappointment. My parents finally gave me a call about a week after the accident. However, they asked why I had been phoning them so much rather than how I was doing. They were with my sister, so apparently they had been ignoring my calls. Despite my surprise at their harshness, I inquired about my sister's and the baby's well-being. They didn't even ask how I was feeling. They just said that both of them were okay. My buddies told me that they had contacted my parents via every available channel to alert them of my accident. My parents didn't inquire about me though. In an attempt to raise some awareness, I disclosed the information myself. Rather, they acknowledged that they already knew but decided not to reply because they thought my sister's needs should come first. Why couldn't they even pretend to care? I asked. At that point, they admitted to deliberately ignoring me. They thought my sister's birth was more significant than my injury, which they said I caused myself. I couldn't understand. It was a drunk truck driver who caused the accident, not me. However, they made it clear that they weren't referring to the truck driver. They accused me of being irresponsible for choosing to drive at such a late hour. They argued it was still unnecessary for me to do such a thing and that I was solely responsible for the accident when I explained that I was actually driving to the hospital to be there for my sister. That was a truly awful and inconsiderate thing for them to say. I hung up on them without saying anything else because I was so angry. I later learned from the hospital personnel that my parents were the first people called when emergency services spotted me at the scene of the accident and dialed 911. They had declined to appear and even asked not to be contacted over it in the future. Because I had my employee ID on me, the hospital subsequently got in touch with my place of employment, which is how my friends and coworkers learned about it. Finding out that rescue personnel had not bothered to arrive after being notified that their daughter had been involved in a catastrophic accident was even more disheartening. Even though I was only attempting to support my sister and the family, their sole reaction to the situation was to hold me responsible for what transpired. After that episode, I came to the realization that my family had no interest in supporting me, even though I wanted to be there for them. After that, not even my sister had bothered to get in touch with me. I really gave up on my family after that episode, so I haven't spoken to them in 3 years. I believed that our connection was normal previous to the accident, but I had always felt that my sister and her priorities took precedence over me. This was verified in the worst conceivable way by the accident. To be clear, I wasn't angry that they didn't come see me while my sister was in delivery. I was disappointed that they didn't feel it was necessary to see me even after my sister had given child. My sister was unable to visit me in the hospital at the time, so I didn't even anticipate her doing so. For my parents, however, it was not impossible. My sister was looked after by her in-laws and fiancé. All I had were my friends, but I was fortunate that they were supportive. They paid for my medical bills and supported me during my recuperation. Although I have yet to repay them, I am immensely appreciative of their generosity and assistance. I doubt I'll ever be able to pay them back in full. My family hasn't made an effort to get in touch with me, despite the fact that the incident occurred 3 years ago. Many members of the extended family have asked me why we are no longer together, but I have kept the answer to myself. I believed we had an unwritten agreement to keep this from other family members, and I followed it. But things have changed recently. My parents had begun discussing the incident in a way that portrayed me as the villain, so one of my aunts got in touch with me. This occurred a few weeks ago when my sister's promotion at work was celebrated with a family dinner hosted by my parents. The subject of my alienation from the family was raised throughout the meal. My parents ultimately made the decision to discuss it after much back and forth. They no longer believed that they had to keep it a secret. However, they altered the details of what transpired following my accident when telling the story. A few facts were accurate. I got into a car accident on the way to the hospital, where I had planned to surprise my sister. They asserted, however, that they were never notified and learned of the tragedy only a few days later. They said that a lot of time had gone by the time they learned, and they were too busy taking care of my sister and the baby to consider the reason I hadn't been in touch with them earlier. Additionally, they stated that they called me as soon as they found out about the accident, but I was too distraught to talk to them. That was not accurate at all. They continued by saying they had made multiple attempts to get in touch with me, but I had consistently turned them down. They said they eventually stopped attempting to contact me. In essence, they framed the entire incident as a miscommunication and portrayed me as the bad guy who had been harsh on them for their lack of concern. Despite my parents' explicit orders not to, my aunt, being the kind person she is, chose to get in touch with me. They said they didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but I knew they were lying to me about what had happened because they didn't want me to know. According to my aunt, I hadn't spoken to my parents in 3 years, and they were truly missing me. She added that I was losing out on the chance to be my niece's aunt and that she herself wouldn't pass up the chance. She advised me to get in touch with my folks. I phoned her back to get more information since I was perplexed. I was astonished when she told me what my folks had stated. Although it had been the other way around, they had portrayed themselves as the victims and me as the egotistical villain. When I learned what they had been telling the family about what had occurred all those years ago, I became enraged. I made the decision to talk to my aunt and be honest with her. In case she didn't believe me, I even promised to connect her with my friends who had paid for my medical bills. I clarified that since my accident, my parents had lost all interest in me. Despite being contacted, they refused to be bothered. I informed her that I didn't even feel angry at them for putting my sister's needs first throughout her delivery, since I recognized how important that was. Their total disregard after that was what irritated me. My parents didn't bother to check on me after my sister had birth and was surrounded by her in-laws and fiancé. My aunt was astonished to hear my side of the story and expressed regret for having doubted me. I was glad she had talked to me, since I might not have known what my parents were talking about behind my back if she hadn't. I'm at a crossroads right now. Within the family, the truth about what transpired 3 years ago is beginning to surface. Numerous family members have contacted me to inform me that I had to tell my aunt about my experience. They claimed that I had every right to protect myself and that if I hadn't spoken up, my parents might have gotten away with their falsehoods. My parents' treatment of me was unfair and undeserved, and some family members have even begun to show sympathy for me, recognizing how terrible my experience was. In a way, I'm grateful to my aunt for hearing my side of the story and making sure my parents' version of events wasn't allowed to go unpunished. But this has also started to cause problems. The family started to distance themselves from my parents after they learned that I had spoken to my aunt and that she had told others the truth. They're now holding me responsible for the consequences. How any of this is my fault is beyond me. I only told my aunt, and even then, I only spoke the truth. It was she who made the decision to tell the other members of the family. My parents, however, are making me answerable for the results. In essence, they framed the entire incident as a miscommunication and portrayed me as the bad guy who had been utterly intolerant of their lack of concern. Despite being expressly told by my parents not to talk to me about this, my aunt, being the kind person that she is, chose to get in touch with me. I understood the true reason behind their assertion that they didn't want to make a big deal out of it. They didn't want anyone to talk to me because they didn't want me to discover that they had been lying about what actually occurred. 3 years had gone by since I last spoke to my parents, and my aunt called to let me know that they truly missed me. She claimed that I was losing out on the chance to be my niece's aunt, and she was aware that she wouldn't pass up such a chance. She therefore advised me to get in touch with my parents once more. I called her back and requested for additional information because I was so perplexed. I was startled when she told me what my parents had told them because they had framed me as the selfish villain and made themselves the victims, even though it had been the other way around. Hearing what they had told everyone in the family about what had transpired all those years ago infuriated me. I made the decision to talk to my aunt and be honest with her. In case she didn't want to trust me, I even offered to connect her with my friends who had paid for all of my costs. I was telling her the truth about what had actually occurred. I clarified that, following my injury, my parents were the ones that truly didn't give a damn about me. They simply did not want to be bothered, even though they had been approached. Since my sister was giving birth, which was also very important at the moment, I wasn't even upset with them for choosing to be there for her. Even so, I became irate when they failed to make the effort to come for me. Even my aunt seemed somewhat surprised when I explained this to her, and she apologized to me for having doubts about me. I was quite grateful that she had chosen to talk to me, since I doubt I would have ever learned what my parents were talking about behind my back. I'm at a crossroads right now. The family is beginning to come to terms with the reality of what transpired 3 years ago. Many individuals have been contacting me and telling me that it was vital for me to tell my aunt the truth. Otherwise, they claim, my parents could have gotten away with lying about what had transpired and painting me as the villain. Many family members have even begun to express sympathy for me, telling me that my parents should never have treated me that way and that what happened to me was truly terrible. They claim it was unjust and unworthy. In one sense, I owe my aunt a great deal for persuading others to listen to me and accept my version of events. If not, my parents' version of events would have been accepted. However, it has become rather problematic for me at the moment because the rest of the family began to turn away from my parents once they learned that I had discussed this with my aunt and that she had discussed it with others. Since all I did was tell folks the truth, I truly don't understand how any of this is my fault. I just told my aunt the truth, and she made the decision to tell everyone else. It would be inaccurate to even state that I told anyone the truth. In any case, they are blaming me for the current state of affairs because, at the moment, the family has essentially been avoiding them and no one wants to talk to them. This is bad because my niece's 3rd birthday, which also happens to be the 3rd anniversary of my injury, is being celebrated in a few weeks. They are currently worried that no one will show up for the birthday celebration now that the family has learned the truth. My niece is thrilled about her birthday celebration, and the whole family has been invited, so that will be somewhat disappointing. But as of yet, no one has replied to the invites, and some have already turned them down without even having to provide a reason. That's what's happening at the moment. My family hasn't spoken to me in 3 years, but they have reached out to me because of this circumstance. They have been attempting to call and text me nonstop. The majority of their messages accuse me of intentionally causing this problem in order to take my sister's attention, but I haven't answered any of their calls since I don't think it's relevant. My parents and even my sister seem to think that I'm intentionally doing this because I find it infuriating that they opted to be with my sister during her childbirth rather than with me. They believe that I'm taking retribution in this way. They even went so far as to affirm that they were certain I intentionally got into the automobile late that evening in order to gain attention. They said that because my sister was giving birth and receiving all of the family's attention, I was envious of her. That's such a cruel, awful thing to say. No matter how much I could despise someone, I can't even fathom thinking that way about them. It's awful to be implied that I intentionally created the disaster in order to get sympathy and attention from my family. Furthermore, they are accusing me of attention-seeking even now, claiming that they are aware that I couldn't bear it when I learned that my sister had gotten a promotion at work and was doing well in her life. They therefore think I made the conscious choice to bring up and negatively portray historical events. They knew exactly what they were attempting to do, so I don't even see why they would say something like that. The hypocrisy of their actions, which were just what they were accusing me of, infuriates me. Since they first attempted to get in touch with me, I have continued to block their numbers and disregard all of their messages. But I don't know what to do next. Do I have to confront them about their falsehoods? Do I have to keep ignoring them and let the family issue work itself out? For the sake of my niece, who is innocent in all of this, should I try to patch things up? I could use some guidance on how to deal with this chaotic family scenario because I'm terribly conflicted. First update. Since my last post, which was approximately 2 weeks ago, things have significantly become worse. Even though I'm still processing all that has transpired, I feel compelled to give you all this update. My folks unexpectedly dropped by my apartment a few days ago. After 3 years of no communication, I was startled to see them at my door. I initially believed they could have come to apologize, but I couldn't have been more mistaken. They began screaming at me as soon as I answered the door and accused me of purposefully attempting to damage their family's name. "How dare you spread lies about us," my father said, pointing his finger at me in a fit of rage. They refused to listen to me when I tried to clarify that I had just given my aunt the truth. My mother said that I was trying to punish them for supporting my sister throughout her delivery because I was jealous of her. They refused to leave when I ordered them to. My dad took a step forward, raising his voice. You must clean up the mess you made. Because of the lies you've propagated, no one wants to go to your niece's upcoming birthday party. I lost it at that point. They were the ones who had been dishonest and had deserted me when I needed them most, I shouted back. My father stepped in the way when I attempted to shut the door. We were instantly engaged in a physical altercation as he pressed against the door. I gave him a hefty shove back in the heat of the moment. He staggered back, almost toppled over. I noticed a mixture of astonishment and horror in my mother's eyes as she yelled. We all remained there for a while, panting. The truth of what had happened beginning to set in. My father turned and remarked, "This isn't over," before they finally left. "You'll be sorry you did this." I sobbed after they were gone. I was crying and trembling from the shock of what had transpired. I've never been violent, so I was afraid that things had gotten to the point where they were physical. I was inundated with texts from different family members the following day. When my parents came to make peace, they apparently told everyone that I had attacked them brutally. I was portrayed by them as dangerous and unstable. I received texts from several family members who were disappointed since they thought they were real. Some, who were more dubious, contacted me to inquire about my version of events. I told people the whole truth and was honest with them. In a particularly nasty communication, my sister advised me to avoid her and her daughter. I feel confused and overburdened. Even if it was only a shove, I know I shouldn't have used physical force. However, I also feel as though I was forced into a difficult situation and had to respond to their violence. I'm concerned about the possible legal repercussions. Could they file assault charges? Do I need to report harassment? The family has never been more split. Some people are adamantly on my side, some are on my parents' side, and some are in the center, not knowing which side to believe. With individuals taking sides over whether or not to attend, the approaching birthday celebration for my niece has turned into a contentious issue. I struggle with guilt as well. Although I am aware that my parents' actions were wrong, I sometimes question whether I ought to have handled the situation differently. My emotional state is a complete mess, even though my logical side understands I was defending myself. All of this has been made possible by my friends' tremendous support. They've been taking turns checking in on me and have offered to let me stay with them if I feel insecure in my apartment. To help me deal with everything, the accident 3 years ago, my family's rejection, and now this confrontation, I'm thinking of going to therapy. My mental health is suffering as a result of everything. I've made the decision to update my email address and phone number for the time being. In case my parents try to visit, I've also let my employer know about the issue. From here, how do I proceed? Should I think about taking legal action to defend myself? What should I do with my relatives who now perceive me as the antagonist in this tale? And above all, how do I begin to recover from this trauma? Second update. About a week has passed since my last update, and somehow things with my family have gotten even more problematic. My niece's third birthday celebration, which ended up being a total bust, was the most important occasion. According to my aunt who was present at the celebration, just a small number of people attended, primarily members of my sister's close family and a few of her acquaintances. Because of the ongoing tension, the great bulk of the extended family decided to avoid it. From the beginning, the mood was extremely tight. My sister was about to cry, my parents were clearly under stress, and my niece kept inquiring about everyone's whereabouts. Things reached a breaking point halfway through the celebration when my mother sobbed and openly accused me of destroying everything and destroying the family. People who were more sympathetic to my side of the story and those who supported my parents got into a fight as a result. With all the yelling and bad vibes, my niece broke down in tears as well. After losing it, my sister yelled at everyone to leave, accusing them of ruining her daughter's birthday. The visitors shuffled awkwardly out as the party came to an abrupt stop. This makes me feel terrible. I feel guilty even though I know logically that I'm not to blame for this. I'm also upset that my parents continue to try to make me the bad guy in all of this. The family has never been more split. There are some in the middle who are fed up with the whole thing, while others are on my side and fully supporting my parents. Over the last 24 hours, I've gotten a variety of texts. While some family members have sent me heartfelt notes accusing me of being responsible for the party disaster, others have offered their support. In a particularly unpleasant email, my sister told me that she no longer considers herself to have a sister and that she never wants to see or speak to me again. I cannot describe how much those remarks stung. I still adore my sister and niece in spite of everything. I'm having trouble figuring out how to proceed from here. A part of me wants to get in touch with my sister and attempt to explain my position again, But another part of me questions whether it would be better to honor her desires and keep my distance, at least for the time being. I have no idea about my parents. I'm sick of the ongoing drama and suffering, but I also want to face them and force them to admit the harm they've caused. As suggested by many of you, I have been attending therapy sessions. Even if it's early, having a professional to discuss all of this with feels fantastic. She is trying to provide me with the skills I need to establish healthy boundaries with my family while also assisting me in overcoming my feelings of guilt and rage. One thing the therapist stated that truly resonated with me was that it's acceptable to put my own mental health and well-being first, even if it meant putting my family at a distance. She emphasized that I'm not accountable for my sister's or parents' behavior and that it is neither healthy nor normal. It's difficult, but I'm trying to take that seriously. Emotional manipulation and family dynamics that have existed for years don't go away quickly. I continue to question whether there was anything I could have done better or if there was a way to stop all of this from occurring. However, I then remind myself of the reality. That accident wasn't anything I asked for. I didn't ask for my family to leave me when I most needed them. Furthermore, I didn't invite them to come to my door and level charges or to misrepresent what had happened. When asked, I only told the truth. So what should I do next? I'm thinking of writing a letter to the entire family to express my truth one final time before removing myself from the matter, not to defend myself or level accusations. Perhaps things would settle down if I express my disinterest in carrying on with this drama. My niece is also on my mind. I wonder whether I should save money for my sister's future, even though she doesn't want me in their lives right now. Perhaps I should create a college fund or something she can use as she gets older. How can all of this bring me peace? How can I emotionally safeguard myself while still maintaining the possibility of future reconciliation? And how can I get over my guilt about something I didn't cause? I appreciate your support, everyone. Having a location where I can discuss all of this and receive unbiased feedback matters more than you can imagine. For now, I'm going to concentrate on getting better and taking things one day at a time, but I'll keep you informed of any significant developments. Third update. About a week has passed since my last update, and I'm still getting used to all that has transpired. I appreciate all of your ongoing help and guidance. The most significant event is that yesterday, I got an email from my parents. When I saw it in my inbox, I was taken aback. I didn't think I'd hear from them after all this time, especially after the disastrous birthday celebration. An apology opened the email. Both in the immediate aftermath of my injury 3 years ago and in the more recent altercations, my parents admitted that they had handled the matter badly. They acknowledged that they should not have disregarded my cries for assistance and that they had erred in putting my sister's needs ahead of their own when I was in the hospital. They also expressed regret for coming to my apartment and starting a physical altercation. My father acknowledged that his harsh behavior was inappropriate and expressed sincere regret for it. They also acknowledged that they had misled the family about what had occurred. They claimed to be embarrassed of what they had done and to have come to see the harm their falsehoods had done to the whole family, not just to me. The email clarified that they had learned their lesson from the tragic birthday party. They realized the seriousness of their acts after witnessing the division in the family and the impact they had on my niece. They claimed that after reflecting deeply for the previous week, they had come to the conclusion that it was time to take responsibility for their errors. I had a range of emotions after reading this email. I felt a mixture of emotions, including a sense of vindication, anger at the length of time it had taken, and a glimmer of optimism that perhaps we could save our relationship. Mostly though, I felt torn. I've been waiting for this apology for the past 3 years. They appear to be taking full responsibility for their conduct, and it looks honest. However, I can't help but question whether it's too little, too late. An email cannot quickly undo years of suffering and betrayal because of the deep-seated grief they have inflicted. A request to meet in person to discuss the matter was made at the end of the email. They stated they hope that one day I'll be willing to give them an opportunity to make amends face-to-face, but they understand if I'm not ready for that. I still haven't replied. While I'm afraid of exposing myself to additional hurt, I also want to agree to meet them to see if there's any chance of repairing our friendship. I had a physical argument with them the previous time I saw them. After talking with my therapist about the email, she advised me to take my time answering. If I do choose to meet, she advised, it could be beneficial to do so in a neutral setting, perhaps with a mediator in attendance. In addition, my sister and niece have been on my mind. According to my parents' email, they have been honest with my sister about what transpired and have urged her to get in touch with me. I haven't heard from her yet. Even though I really miss her and my niece, I understand that I must give them space for the time being. It seems that my parents have apologized for their lies and explained the matter in a mass email to the rest of the family. Some family members have messaged me to give their support and to express their amazement at the news. I'm at a crossroads now. Should I strive to mend our relationship after accepting my parents' apology? Do I keep my distance for my own psychological well-being? Is it possible for me to appreciate their efforts without completely reintegrating them into my life just yet? In addition, I'm struggling with my own sense of duty and guilt. There is a part of me that questions whether I could have handled things differently, even though I know rationally that I'm not to fault for this circumstance. I'm making an effort to concentrate on my own recovery and development going forward. To help control my stress and anxiety, I've started mindfulness meditation and am still in treatment. I've also been considering changing my life for the better. I'm thinking about looking for a new job, maybe in a different city, to give myself a fresh start and some physical separation from all of this drama, not to escape my troubles. I have made the decision to establish a college fund for my niece. It seems like the appropriate thing to do, regardless of whether my sister wants to stay in touch with me. Perhaps when she's older, she'll realize how much I've always loved her. From here, how do I proceed? How can I strike a balance between the need to emotionally safeguard myself and the prospect of reconciliation? And with all of this, how can I begin to reconstruct my life and identity? Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support along this trip. For me, your counsel and encouraging remarks have been invaluable. Although I have no idea what the future will bring, knowing that this community is supporting me makes me feel a little more prepared to face it.